Hey guys, tonight we're heading into a bone-chilling, wind-slashing, snow-blasting world where your eyelashes freeze together if you blink too slowly. And that's before sunset. We're talking about the kind of storm that makes the trees groan and disappear under an avalanche of powdery silence. You know, the kind of night when even the wolves reconsider going outside. But you're not just watching this from a warm living room. No, you're in the middle of it. You're living it. And you're about to find out what it takes to survive, let alone sleep, in a teepee during a brutal snowstorm on the open plains. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I'm always curious to know who's joining this little campfire in the storm. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins just as the last sliver of sun disappears behind the western horizon. The colour drains from the sky, and with it goes whatever warmth was left. You're standing near the edge of a vast encampment, somewhere along what's now the northern edge of South Dakota, though you wouldn't call it that. You're part of a nomadic Lakota band, and winter has come early, angrily even. What started as a gentle flurry at midday has now morphed into a full-blown snowstorm, dumping heavy white over your entire world. You hear the wind first. It screams low through the grass and rattles the lodge poles above you. It's that special kind of wind that doesn't just move air, it cuts. It finds the seams in your clothing and whispers icily against your skin, just enough to remind you who's in charge. The snow falls sideways now, slanting like needles, stinging your face as you hurry across the packed snow toward your family's teepee. Around you, the village pulses with quiet coordination. Horses are being brought in closer, their reins looped to central tie lines. Children are being ushered inside, their moccasins wet with slush. The smell of burning wood leaks out from smoke holes like the breath of sleeping beasts. Inside each lodge, firelight flickers, and shadows move like slow dancers behind the stretched hide walls. You reach your family's teepee and duck inside quickly, pulling the heavy buffalo hide flap closed behind you. Instant difference. Gone is the shrieking wind. In its place, warmth, relative warmth anyway, the kind that doesn't punch you in the nose. The fire pit at the centre glows with orange embers, just beginning to rekindle after a slow burn through the afternoon. Someone, probably your uncle, has already laid fresh logs on top, and soon the flames are rising again, licking toward the conical ceiling like an offering to the ancestors. The space smells like cedar, smoked meat, and a faint earthy musk from the hides that form the walls. The teepee's interior is a kaleidoscope of practicality. You sit low to the ground on a platform of layered hides, deer, elk and buffalo, all softened by use and time. They're arranged in a circular pattern around the fire, forming both bed and bench. Above, the inner lining hangs down like a second skin, trapping heat and keeping the inside from icing over. The lodge itself is about 15 feet in diameter. Not huge, but enough for 2 small families to share. Tonight there are 7 of you. 2 elders, 3 adults, and 2 kids. That's 7 bodies, each a little furnace, packed into a well-insulated cone with a live flame in the centre. Cozy is an understatement. Slightly smoky, yes, but cozy. And in a storm like this, it's heaven. You crouch low and brush snow off your leggings before settling into your spot near the fire. Your hands sting as they thaw, and you catch the eye of your grandmother, who silently offers a strip of dried bison meat. It's tough, smoky and salty. Perfect. Your body is burning calories like crazy just trying to stay warm, and that little chew of protein feels like a second breath. From outside of yours, you hear the faint rustle of someone adjusting the lodge's smoke flaps. They're controlled by long poles that extend from the ground up through the top of the teepee. Adjusting them is an art. Get it wrong and the fire smokes you out. Get it right and the lodge warms evenly without turning into a chimney. Tonight the wind is shifting constantly, so someone's probably been fiddling with it all day. Now the real test begins. Sleeping through the night. As night sets in, your outer layers, fur-lined robes, thick moccasins and feathered hoods, double as bedding. You don't really change into pyjamas out here. You just rearrange your layers. Everyone curls toward the fire, feet in, heads out. Your back rests against the slightly sloped wall, insulated by more hides layered up like a nest. Even your dog curls beside you, stealing your warmth while giving some back. You glance up through the teepee's open smoke hole and catch a glimpse of something unexpected. Stars. Just for a moment the storm eases, and you see the Big Dipper hanging low over the horizon. It's familiar, even sacred. In some stories it's a bear being chased across the sky. In others, it's a warrior's shield. Either way, it's watching over you. Then the wind kicks up again, and snow flurries dance back into the opening above, whispering against the smoke liner like ghosts trying to sneak inside. You wrap yourself tighter in your buffalo robe. It's heavy, warm, still smelling faintly of the animal it once was. You feel its warmth seeping into you, slow and steady. And just as your eyes begin to close, you remember something your uncle said earlier. You don't sleep too deep in a storm like this, you rest, but one ear always listens. Because out here, winter doesn't knock, it just lets itself in. The teepee you're huddled in right now, this isn't just some canvas cone thrown together with sticks and a prayer. It's a marvel. A masterclass in portable architecture designed over generations by people who knew how to read the wind, the snow, and the subtle moods of the land. And tonight, as you sit shoulder to shoulder with your family and the storm howls like a hungry spirit just outside the flap, you're about to appreciate every inch of it. Start with the bones. The skeleton of the teepee is made from long, straight lodgepole pines, usually around 12 to 20 of them, carefully selected, peeled and smoothed. Each pole is placed with precision, lashed together near the top with rawhide or sinew, then spread out to form a wide base. That base? It's wide on purpose. The broader the bottom, the more stable it sits in heavy winds, and the more people it can fit. A low centre of gravity means even when the wind whips like it's got a grudge, the structure hugs the ground instead of taking flight. Now imagine doing all this without nails, screws or blueprints. Just muscle memory, tradition and serious storm season instincts. The outer covering, the skin of the teepee, is usually made from tanned buffalo hides sewn together, though in later periods canvas took over when trade made it more available. But tonight, in this era, it's thick hide, hand-stitched, waterproofed with brains and smoke, and heavy enough that it won't flap or tear easily in the wind. The teepee's shape actually helps it survive the storm. That cone design lets wind flow around it, not against it. No flat walls for the blizzard to bully. From the inside you feel safe, not invincible, but snug in a way that makes you trust the walls even when they creak. Even more genius, the inner liner. This isn't just decoration or extra padding, it's crucial. That liner hangs around the interior about 4 feet off the ground, creating an insulating air pocket between the outer hide and your sleeping space. Warm air from the fire rises, but instead of rushing out the smoke hole immediately, it's guided up by the liner, while cold air from the base is kept out. You didn't get a science lecture about this growing up, you just learned that it worked, every single night. Even in storms like this, it's easy to forget, surrounded by smartphones and central heating, that your ancestors figured this stuff out through trial, error, and the occasional near-death winter. They didn't have thermometers, their gauge was simple. Survive, then improve, as you lean back against the hides and feel the structure shudder gently under another blast of wind. You remember stories of teepees surviving storms that took out trees, not by brute strength, but by design. Flexibility. The poles bend without breaking, the hides shift but don't rip. Everything gives just enough. There's a kind of quiet admiration you feel, like you're inside a living thing, not just a shelter. The lodge groans a little, like it's sighing with you. One of the older men mutters that the storm will last till morning, and then adds, half joking, that the teepee's sturdier than half the horses. You all chuckle softly, because you know it's kind of true, and yet the teepee is more than just shelter. It's a canvas, literally and figuratively, for your life. The smoke stains along the top. That's years of fires, stories, births and deaths. The stitching on the hide, done by your aunt or your grandmother or someone who lived 100 winters ago. The poles may have names. Some families bless them before travel. Others pass down the same poles for generations. If a lodge is old, it's respected. If it's new, it's decorated. Each scratch and dent tells a chapter of someone's story. Now here's a quirky little fact not everyone knows. Some families used to paint protective symbols on their teepees before winter. Circles, zigzags, animal shapes, each carrying spiritual meaning. Not just decoration, shields against what the wind might bring. And depending on the region, some even sprinkled crushed herbs or charcoal between the inner and outer layers of hide to help insulate or drive away spirits drawn to cold and shadow. Tonight, as the fire crackles and the wind screeches like a frustrated hawk, You're grateful for every odd ritual and every stitch of buffalo hide overhead. But here's the debate, the scholarly one, the kind academics love to argue over in heated indoor conferences. Were teepees really that effective in deep winter? Or were they more of a compromise, mobile, functional, but far from ideal when it got truly deadly outside? Some archaeologists argue that for regions with heavier snowfall and longer winters, like the far north or the Rockies, the teepee was eventually abandoned in favour of more permanent winter lodges, earth-covered pit houses or log cabins. They claim that in a full whiteout, even the best designed teepee could only do so much. Others, though, push back, saying that with proper insulation, family cooperation and skilled fire maintenance, these structures held their own. They point to oral histories and records from early European observers who walked into a teepee mid-blizzard and found it surprisingly toasty. Truth is probably somewhere in between. You're not getting spa-level warmth, but you're not freezing either. And out here, survival is more than a temperature reading. It's also psychological. That fire in the centre, that circle of faces, that soft rustle of someone adjusting their robes or humming a lullaby. Those things matter. You shift your weight, adjusting the folded hide under your hip. The fire spits, sending a tiny burst of sparks toward the smoke hole. You hear the poles groan again, not from stress, but from age, from having seen 100 storms like this and still standing. Your mother nudges a few coals with a stick, adds a chunk of wood, and watches the flames climb. The light flickers across her face, soft and golden. It's a face shaped by the same wind outside and yet untouched by fear. You close your eyes for a moment, not quite asleep, not quite awake, and you realise the teepee isn't just surviving this snowstorm, it's breathing with it. You wake up briefly, just enough to shift your legs and tuck the robe tighter under your chin. The fire's dimmed, but its orange heart still pulses like a sleeping animal. Around you, the teepee holds its ground, unmoved by the shrieking outside. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the hide walls, snow stacks itself into drifts, slyly trying to sneak its way in. But for now, you're warm. Not hot, not cosy like a down comforter on a memory foam mattress, but warm enough to breathe easy. As your eyelids flutter back open, you notice something you didn't catch before. You're not the only one awake. Across the fire, your grandfather is sitting up, rubbing his hands near the coals, his silhouette outlined in firelight. He doesn't say anything. He just nods at you like, yeah, I'm up too. It's not weird. It's normal. Everyone in here has their own sleep rhythm, and tonight, no one expects uninterrupted dreams. Now you take a moment to really look at the layout of the camp. Not just your teepee, but the entire village. You picture it in your head, the way it looked just before the storm swallowed everything in white. It's not random. Teepees are placed in a wide circle, a formation that's more strategic than ceremonial. It creates a kind of buffer, a snowbreak really, where each teepee shields the next. It's a way of pooling strength. The circle closes around a communal space in the centre, like a drawn bowstring around a campfire. Depending on the season, the position of your family's lodge within the circle might change. Certain families, or individuals with responsibilities like spiritual leadership or council duties, might camp closer to the centre. Young warriors and hunters tend to take outer positions as both symbolic and functional. In storms like this, the outer teepees bear the brunt of the wind. The people in those lodges don't complain. If anything, it's a point of pride. You remember your cousin bragging earlier, before the snow came down in curtains, that their teepee was the northernmost in the circle. The wind hits us first, he said, like it was a badge of honour. And in a way it is. They're the wall that protects the rest. Snowstorms aren't rare, not out here, so camps are built with this in mind. Horses and dogs are tied between teepees, forming a living barricade. Sleds and supplies are arranged in neat rows just beyond the main circle. Everyone knows where everything is. No scrambling in the dark, no fumbling around when the storm turns savage. You can navigate this camp blindfolded, and honestly, in weather that's like this, you almost do. When you stepped outside earlier, just before sunset, the footprints were already filling in. Now, a few hours later, the entire world has reset. A fresh layer of snow covers everything like it's never been walked on before. But inside this circle, things are still alive, still warm. Someone is probably adjusting their smoke flaps in another teepee right now, jabbing a long pole through a narrow slit in the hide and pulling down against the wind. Another lodge might be telling a story, soft laughter muffled by snow-thick walls. A baby cries faintly, then quiets just as fast. This is winter, but not death. Now think about this. That circular layout, this whole camp structure. It mirrors more than just practicality. It reflects a worldview. Many Plains tribes, including the Lakota, the Cheyenne and the Blackfoot, believe in the sacredness of the circle. The earth is a circle. The seasons move in circles. Life and death, sun and moon, all dance in arcs and loops, not straight lines. So of course the camp does too. Of course your sleeping body, curled inward against the cold, becomes part of that sacred geometry. And here's a little-known tidbit to chew on. Some villages would actually tilt the openings of their teepees slightly east during the winter. Not directly east, because that could bring too much morning chill, but just enough to catch early light while avoiding harsh winds. Think of it like ancient passive solar design. Wake up with the sun, stay shielded from the storm. As you settle back against the hides, you glance around your own teepee. Your family, sleeping or close to it, forms their own soft circle. Your little cousin has rolled into his mother's side. The dog is curled into a tight spiral near the fire, twitching in dreams. You spot your brother, mouth open, snoring softly like a saw blade in syrup. Grandfather is still awake, still watching the coals. His silhouette looks smaller than it used to. You close your eyes again, then open them, still not asleep. The fire needs feeding soon. You almost offer to do it, but you know if Grandfather wanted your help, he'd ask. This is his quiet time, his watch. He's probably thinking of other storms, of nights when he was where you are now, young, half awake, wondering if the storm would flatten the lodge. He probably remembers storms that did. Not all teepees make it. Sometimes the lashings fail. Sometimes a pole splits. It's rare, but not impossible. When that happens, people pull together. Shift lodges, pile hides into emergency shelters. No one gets left to freeze. That's the thing. This isn't just weather. It's a test. One your ancestors built an entire lifestyle around surviving. But now, let's be honest, even the best designed camp isn't a luxury resort. You might be warm enough to sleep, but you're still surrounded by wind and ice. The floor is frozen earth, softened with hides. The air near the ground is cold enough to sting your nose if you roll off your bedroll. If the fire dies completely, you'll know within minutes. You'll feel it in your joints, like the cold is knocking on bone. Still, you're not afraid, because this system, teepee, camped, circled, shared heat, silent watch shifts, this has worked for centuries. It's not a guess. It's a guarantee if you do your part. And just as you start to drift again, a gust hits the lodge hard enough to make the poles shift. Everyone stirs, half asleep. Grandfather finally speaks. Just the wind reminding us we're not alone. You smile, eyes closed, because you believe him. The fire crackles a little louder now. Grandfather's added more wood, split pieces of aspen and spruce that hiss briefly as any lingering snow melts away in the flame. The warmth slowly blooms outward again, pushing the cold back into the shadows. It's not toasty like a furnace or radiator, but it's enough to keep your fingers from going stiff, enough to keep the night survivable. You're half awake, half dreaming, when the real star of the night begins to show off, the fire pit. That humble little circle of glowing coals at the centre of your world tonight isn't just a heater. It's a science experiment passed down by people who didn't call it thermodynamics, but understood it in their bones. Right now, you're feeling the genius of how fire interacts with space inside a teepee. The flame lives in a shallow pit dug directly into the earth, maybe about a foot deep. It's surrounded by flat stones that absorb and radiate heat long after the flames die down. The shape of the teepee directs smoke upward, while pulling cold air down and out along the base. And the inner liner? It prevents backdrafts and keeps the warm air cycling above your heads, giving the fire a kind of breathing room. It's like living inside a soft, flickering chimney that somehow doesn't fill with smoke, at least when everything's working right. Tonight it's working just fine. You can lie back, wrapped in hide, and stare up at the smoke curling into the rafters. There's something hypnotic about it, the way it wavers in the updraft, then escapes through the hole at the top like a ghost slipping out of its skin. This open flame system inside a hide-covered cone might seem like a disaster waiting to happen, but here's the magic: it rarely burns the place down. That's not luck, it's precision. The fire pit is placed dead centre for even heat distribution. The hides are soaked and smoked during their preparation, making them surprisingly flame-resistant. And the lodge poles? Spaced just right, steeply angled and arranged in a spiral so no one beam carries the full weight of the structure. Plus, the fire itself isn't a bonfire, it's controlled, low, maintained like a sacred heartbeat. You don't just toss logs on it and walk away, you watch it. You learn its moods. The older ones, like grandfather, know how to adjust the coals just so, how to bank the fire to keep it alive through the night without letting it blaze too hot. You shift again on your bedding and feel a little burst of warmth rise as the fire gets stronger. The temperature inside the teepee might hover just above freezing, not exactly balmy, but compared to the deadly chill outside, it's the tropics, and there's an almost spiritual centre to this fire. You don't talk over it, not loudly. You don't turn your back to it for too long. Stories are told facing it. Food is shared around it. Disagreements are settled near it. In many tribes it's said the fire is alive, a being, a presence that listens and gives warmth but demands respect. That feeling's especially sharp on nights like this, when the rest of the world is trying to kill you with cold. You reach your hands out toward the flames, and that they tingle as blood rushes back into your fingertips. Then comes the strange comfort of pain, the sting of reawakening nerves. Fire hurts in the way warmth sometimes has to. Quirky fact incoming, here's one for the odd files. Some families would toss cedar or sweetgrass onto the fire at night, not just for the scent, but for protection. The smoke was believed to carry prayers upward, out the smoke hole and into the night sky. On stormy nights, you'd often see someone do it quietly without fanfare. Just a pinch of herbs between fingers, dropped onto the coals like a secret being offered. You don't always know who it's for, you just know it matters. Tonight, you notice grandfather doing just that. A slow reach into his pouch, a whisper you can't hear, and a sudden puff of fragrant smoke rising into the rafters. The scent is earthy and sweet, cutting through the sharper edge of wood smoke, and somehow the lodge feels warmer after that. But this system, genius as it is, isn't flawless. There's an ongoing debate among anthropologists and experimental archaeologists, yes, that's a real title, about just how well teepees vent smoke. Some argue that in high winds, like tonight, the draft pulls too fast and forces smoke back down. Others claim that with proper flap control and a low, steady fire, the smoke vents cleanly even in a storm. A few modern recreations have shown mixed results. Some families swear by teepees as efficient, cosy shelters, while others report sleeping with their heads low just to breathe easier. Here's what you know. Right now, the smoke isn't bothering you. The teepee groans, the fire hisses, and there's the occasional moment when your eyes sting, but you're breathing, and you're not coughing. That's all that matters. You think about how fire is your only real line of defense right now. If it goes out, the teepee won't hold heat. Your body, wrapped in robes and hides, will fight to stay warm, but it won't last forever. Your ancestors knew this intimately. That's why every adult learns to build, feed, and protect fire before almost anything else. It's not just about cooking or storytelling, it's life. You look over and see the kids still asleep, little mounds under heavy buffalo hides. You think about how the fire's been their guardian since birth, through coughs, blizzards, fevers, and quiet dreams. It's always been there, flickering in the middle of everything. And maybe that's the heart of it. In the middle of chaos, cold, and night, there's always this small, steady flame. You don't need roaring heat or glowing embers that shoot sparks to the stars. You just need enough. Enough warmth, enough light, enough fire to make it to morning. And somehow that flickering little heart of flame gives you the courage to let your own heartbeat slow, to sink back into the layers of hide and fur, to stop listening to the wind for just a moment. You don't sleep easy, but you sleep, and the fire stays alive. The wind is throwing a tantrum now. You hear it slam into the side of the teepee like a furious ghost that wasn't invited inside. The poles creak, not in panic, but with the tired grunt of something ancient that's done this 1,000 times before. And above you, up near the smoke hole, the flaps rustle and snap, each gust tugging at the twin ears of hide like it's trying to peel the roof off. You pull your robe tighter, nestling deeper into your bedding. Everyone's stirring now. The storm has reached that next level, the kind where you wonder just how much louder it's going to get. It's the smoke hole's turn in the spotlight tonight, and honestly, it deserves it. This small, seemingly simple gap at the top of the teepee, total game changer, is the unsung hero of teepee survival, the one part of the structure that turns a cone of animal skin into something livable, even cozy during a full-on blizzard. The smoke hole isn't just left open by accident, it's controlled by two long poles, about the length of a small tree, anchored into the edges of two triangular flaps that stretch up like ears above the top of the lodge. These aren't just decorative. They act like adjustable vents, catching or deflecting wind depending on how you position them. Tonight, the person managing them, you're guessing your father, is fighting a battle against physics, weather, and luck. In light breezes, it's simple. Adjust the flaps to create a gentle draft that pulls smoke up and out. But in high winds, it's a whole performance. You need to align the flaps so the wind doesn't shove smoke back down into your lungs. And when the snow's coming sideways, as it is now, you have to tweak them to keep flakes from swirling into the lodge and turning your floor into slush. You watch as your father rises, silhouetted against the firelight, and grabs the adjustment poles that lean near the doorway. He slips outside just for a second, long enough to yank the flaps at a sharper angle, forcing the storm to flow around the teepee like water over a rock. He returns with snow in his hair and shoulders, stomps his boots, and ducks back inside with a grunt that says it'll hold, for now. It's an underrated dance, this smoke hole adjustment. Not dramatic, no drums or chants, but absolutely essential. One bad position and you're coughing on wood smoke or freezing in minutes. And the truth? Not everyone gets it right. It takes practice. You've heard of young men bragging they can set up a lodge alone, but forget to manage the flaps and end up with black lungs and icicles in their bedding. Here's a fun, slightly weird fact that doesn't always make the history books. The smoke hole was often seen as a spiritual passage, not just a vent. In some tribal traditions, it's where the spirits come and go, and where dreams sneak out to find the sky. Some elders believe that if you died inside the lodge, your soul rose up through that hole and followed the smoke trail into the next world. And on nights like this, when the sky is boiling with snow and starlight, it's not hard to believe it. You lie back and look up and see the firelight flickering against the rafters, and then beyond that, the dark opening above like an eye peering back at you. Now here's the scholarly mess. Historians still argue whether the flaps were truly effective in extreme weather. Some claim they never sealed completely and that a steady wind would always find its way inside. Others insist the design was brilliant for its time, better even than many settler cabins with their drafty chimneys and poor insulation. Experimental archaeology groups have rebuilt traditional teepees using buffalo hide and found that when flap adjustments are handled with care, the interior stays warm and breathable even at sub-zero temperatures. But the caveat? Constant maintenance. Someone has to always be watching the flaps. This isn't a set it and forget it situation, and tonight, maintenance is the name of the game. Your father settles back into his spot near the door, nodding slightly at the way the smoke now rises cleanly again. For the moment, everything is working. The fire breathes, the wind circles but doesn't break in. The snow hisses softly as it brushes the outside hide, but can't melt its way inside. You feel safer again. The flap adjustment poles are returned to their corner, slender but strong. You're always aware of them, even in the dark. They are your throttle, your rudder, your emergency lever. You don't fall asleep without someone on flap duty, not in a storm like this. You nestle deeper into your robe, but your thoughts drift upward. It's hard not to keep glancing toward the smoke hole, like it's a window into something bigger. It's a strange duality. The smoke hole connects you to both danger and safety. Through it, warmth escapes, but also the smoke that would choke you. Through it, soap tries to sneak in, but stars wink back at you when the clouds break. You've even heard stories, half believed, half teased, about people hearing voices through the smoke hole during storms, the wind getting twisted into something that almost talks. Not that you believe it exactly, but also you're not about to say it out loud tonight. As you start to drift again, the lodge gives another long groan. This time it's the sound of wind pushing at the entire structure. The poles shift just slightly, an old tree creaking under pressure, but they don't move out of place. The lodge leans into the wind and then settles again. The firelight dances upward. The smoke hole holds steady. Your father exhales beside you, a quiet rhythm in the dark, and far above you the opening stares back, half invitation, half warning. You close your eyes again, the warmth of the fire washing over your cheeks, and you wonder, not for the first time, how many nights your ancestors stared through that same hole and prayed the snow wouldn't take the roof with it. You don't realise you've drifted off until a sound yanks you halfway back, soft, scraping, rhythmic, not sharp enough to alarm, but constant enough to notice. You open one eye and scan the lodge. It's your grandmother, moving slowly around the interior wall, checking the hides. She's quiet as snowfall, her fingers brushing over the seams, feeling for cold air like a doctor checking for a weak pulse. You admire her even half asleep, how she moves with the lodge, knows its moods, its aches, its weaknesses. You don't say anything. You just watch her work, the dim firelight casting her shadow long and curved along the teepee wall like she's part of the structure. Tonight she's doing something that most people wouldn't notice unless they'd been raised inside one of these lodges, checking the insulation. Specifically, the buffalo hides used to line the lower walls and sleeping areas. You'd think a thin animal skin wouldn't do much in sub-zero weather, but here's the secret. They're not dot thin. They're thick, heavy, and treated like survival gold. A good buffalo hide is the difference between a long night and a last night. Every hide tells a story. You glance at the one beneath your shoulder. It's patchy in places, fur rubbed thin by time, but still incredibly warm. The top side is soft, dark, still faintly fragrant with smoke and the musk of the animal it came from. The underside is rough and treated, stitched in places where it cracked during tanning. It's not pretty by modern standards, but that's the point. It wasn't made to look good, it was made to keep you alive when the air outside could snap your bones in half. The hides that wrap around the base of the lodge serve more than one purpose. First, they block drafts. Cold air has a way of pooling near the ground, sneaking under the maned cover where the teepee meets the frozen earth. Without those thick insulating layers, you'd feel it instantly, like a ghost licking your ankles. Second, they create a kind of thermal barrier, holding in the heat radiating from your sleeping bodies and the fire. It's like old-world double-paned glass, but alive and hand-sewn. And third, maybe most importantly, they make it feel safe. Wrapped in those layers, you don't just feel warm, you feel protected, covered, hidden from the storm's hungry eyes. As your grandmother tucks in a loose corner and shakes out a small drift of powdery snow that found its way in, you remember helping her smoke that very hide years ago. It had taken days. First, the flesh was scraped clean with a sharpened bone. Then came the stretching, the drying, the endless rubbing with brains and fat to keep it soft. Finally, the smoking. Hanging the hide over a low fire with green wood to add strength, and that signature smell, woodsy, slightly sweet, unmistakably home. The process was long, laborious, but not optional. That's the thing most outsiders don't get. You don't just use buffalo hides, you earn them. And it's not just buffalo. In some parts of the plains, especially further north or west, families used elk, moose, and even bear hides, each with its own properties. Buffalo was the warmest, hands down. Elk was lighter, more flexible, better for clothing. Moose? Thicker, harder to work with, but nearly waterproof. Some teepees even used combinations, layering them like a cake of evolution and necessity. Here's a strange but true fact. The warmth of buffalo hides was so respected that in some early contact periods, European traders literally begged for them. Traded entire crates of metal goods for just a few well-smoked robes. And those robes? Often handed down like heirlooms. You might be sleeping under one that kept your great-grandmother alive during the winter when the snow didn't stop to occur, or the winter of the frozen moon, depending on which calendar your people use. You shift slightly, testing the hide wrapped over your shoulders. It's heavy, like sleeping under a warm animal that breathes with you. That weight isn't just comfort, it's strategy. In extreme cold, the danger isn't the freezing air, it's losing your body heat. So every layer matters. The hide beneath you cushions and insulates. The one over you traps heat. Even the robe wrapped around your legs is working overtime, reflecting warmth inward like a mirror of fur and effort. But still, it's not purred. There are moments like now when a particularly sharp gust cuts through the teepee seams and brushes your skin. You shiver. So does your brother across the fire, pulling his robe tighter. Your grandmother notices and adds another hide to the bedding near him, tucking it in with the same care she'd give to a child. This attention to warmth isn't just a comfort thing, it's survival math. Because here's the terrifying truth about cold. When it gets bad enough, your body stops fighting. You stop shivering, you get sleepy, and if no one notices, you don't wake up. There's an old debate among survival experts about whether layered animal skins were good enough compared to modern gear. Some argue they couldn't possibly compare to down insulation, synthetic liners, or reflective thermal blankets. Others, especially those who've tested it firsthand in the field, swear that properly prepared hides, especially buffalo, match, or even outperform high-end sleeping bags in extreme weather. The key is knowledge. You can't just throw a hide on your shoulders and expect miracles. You have to know how to layer, how to dry them, how to wrap them correctly without creating cold pockets. Your people knew. No! And so you're still warm. Not because of chance, but because of layers of understanding stitched into every seam. The fire crackles again, the sound almost musical now. You glance up. Snow is still falling through the smoke hole, just a few stray flakes melting before they hit the coals. Outside, the world is white, cold, and angry. But inside you've got buffalo on your back, fur beneath your knees, and a flickering fire holding the dark at bay. And your grandmother, still padding around the lodge, making sure no one freezes under her watch. That's winter in a teepee. 1 part animal, 1 part fire, and 1 part love stitched into every hide. The storm isn't letting up. If anything, it's getting louder, meaner, like it's testing how much you're willing to put up with before cracking. Snow hammers the lodge now, not gently but in angry fists, pounding the outer walls with a steady thud, thud, thud that seems to pulse with your heartbeat. But still, the teepee holds. It always does. And now that you've warmed again under the thick hides and your grandmother has done her quiet sweep around the interior about you, you start to think about the one thing no modern insulation can replace. Body heat. Not just yours, everyone's. It's kind of funny, isn't it? That the thing keeping you warm right now, more than the fire, more than the buffalo hides, is the quiet, snoring, heat-leaking bodies of your entire family, curled up like rolled-up blankets around the fire. The way people sleep in a teepee during a snowstorm isn't random. It's not just wherever you drop, you drop. There's a logic to it. A system passed down without needing to be taught in words. It's as much tradition as it is science, and you're living it. You're in a circle, for starters. That's non-negotiable. Fire in the centre, people arranged like spokes on a wheel. It's more than just aesthetic. It lets the warmth reach everyone evenly, and it ensures no one is blocking the smoke flow with their biddy. Too close to the fire and you risk waking up with dried out lips and singed eyebrows. Too far and your toes start to flirt with frostbite. The sweet spot is about arm's length away, close enough to stretch your fingers out and feel the heat, but not close enough to cook. And then there's who sleeps where. It's not random either. In most families, the elders get prime spots, slightly closer to the fire, with extra hides and padding underneath. Not because they're fragile necessarily, but because they've earned it. They're the ones who kept the fire going for you, when you were small and freezing and didn't know how to tie your moccasins properly. They deserve to be warm now. Kids and younger folks like you sleep further out, closer to the walls, but not at the very edges. That's where the cold sinks in. Sometimes there's a pet dog nestled between two people, pressed against someone's back, more fur blanket than watchdog. And the strongest adults, like your parents or older siblings, they usually sleep closest to the entrance, the spot that gets hit first if the flap blows open or a wild animal gets too curious. Tonight, your family fits this pattern like a glove. Your grandfather is closest to the fire, half sitting, half sleeping, in that way elders do when they've spent so many nights tending flames they can't fully shut off. Your younger cousins are tucked between their parents, little heads barely poking out from under their buffalo robes. Your older brother, bigger, heavier, takes the outer edge by the door, wrapped in what looks like 4 hides and snoring like a saw chewing through a log. You're between him and your mother, the in-between zone. Not too young to need tucking, not old enough to take a shift by the flap. And you're all breathing. That's the thing that sticks with you as you lie there half awake. All these sleeping bodies, this living circle, is generating its own weather inside the teepee. The air is warm, humid even, laced with wood smoke and the slightly sour smell of unwashed wool and hide. It's not unpleasant, it's just real, human. You inhale slowly and feel the heat rising from everyone's skin. The low rhythmic sounds of snoring, the occasional sigh or shifting of limbs. It's oddly comforting, a shared dream in motion. Here's a lesser-known fact that would raise eyebrows in any modern camping group. Some families, during the coldest storms, intentionally packed more people into a teepee than usual, not just for shelter but for heat. Sleep was crowded, awkward, and full of accidental elbow-to-the-face moments, but no one complained. The shared warmth saved lives. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, elders would tell the war stories as people drifted off, not loudly, just soft whispers shared around the fire to ease everyone into sleep. Because nothing makes a blizzard seem smaller than a good story about surviving a worse one. You remember one now, something your grandmother told last winter. A tale about a great snow that came so fast the river froze mid-flow and the birds dropped from the sky. Whole villages buried under the drifts. But the people in that story, they had their teepees, their fire, their circle, and they lived. There's an ongoing debate among historians about whether these communal sleeping arrangements were strictly utilitarian or rooted in cultural values of unity and closeness. Some argue it was just a necessity of survival, pack tight, stay warm. But others suggest there's something deeper at play, that these shared sleeping spaces built stronger bonds, wove families together even tighter than the hides on the walls. You don't just share warmth, you share breathing, dreaming, even fear. You think about that now as you listen to the wind scream across the plains. Out there it's wild, lonely, freezing, but in here, inside the layered skins and glowing firelight, you are together. That's the warmth no animal hide can match. It's also the warmth that wakes you up when someone shifts suddenly. Your cousin whimpers in her sleep and turns over. Your mother stirs and gently pulls her closer. No one fully wakes, but the movement causes a ripple. You readjust your robe. Your brother mumbles something unintelligible. Even the dog lets out a sigh like it's exhausted from guarding nothing. There's something sacred about this, not in a church-holy kind of way, but in the quiet reverence of knowing everyone's survival is knit together. No one sleeps too deep. No one sleeps alone. You're part of something bigger than your own comfort. You glance up at the smoke hole again. Still open, still dark, but still letting the fire breathe. And as you pull your robe over your ears and nuzzle deeper into the hide beneath you, you think, this circle of sleeping bodies is not just warm, it's invincible. At least until someone rolls over and steals your buffalo robe. Again. Sleep comes and goes in shallow waves. The kind that let your body rest but keep your brain half lit. Always listening, always sniffing for smoke or frost or something that feels off. You turn over, the robe wrapped around you shifting just enough to let in a sliver of cold air that snakes down your back like a snowflake with bad intentions. You suck in a sharp breath and curl tighter, dragging the hide closer. That's the thing about sleeping in a teepee during a snowstorm. It's less about being comfortable, more about being adequately wrapped. And speaking of wrapping, let's talk about what you're actually wearing. Because out here, your bedtime fashion is layered, functional, vibrio, and about as far from silk pyjamas as you can imagine. Every stitch of it serves one purpose: keep your body from surrendering to the cold. You're not just sleeping in a robe, you're sleeping in history. You've got on inner leggings made of softened deerskin, wrapped tight and tucked into high moccasins lined with rabbit fur. Over that, a long tunic, heavy and fringed, stitched with patterns your aunt spent weeks perfecting. Then comes the robe, a full buffalo hide, thick and warm, thrown over your shoulders and clasped with a strip of sinew. Underneath, you've stuffed dried grass and extra scraps of fur to keep the heat from escaping. You are a walking insulation unit. Most of this doesn't come off when you go to sleep. In fact, you add to it. You pull on an extra pair of wool-wrapped mittens or slide a warm stone, heated by the fire, into your bedroll. Someone hands you a rolled-up fur to tuck under your knees. It's less like dressing for bed and more like gearing up for a siege, and you're not alone. Everyone in the lodge is sleeping in layers. Your brother's curled like a bear under a robe so large it could double as a tent flap. Your mother's wearing a cap stitched from otter fur, ear flaps tied down tight. Even the dog has an extra skin thrown over it, tucked like a loaf beside the fire. You glance over and see your grandmother asleep now too, her face barely visible beneath the furred edge of her wrap. She looks like she's hibernating. Maybe she is. Modern minds might wonder, how did people not suffocate in all that? And sure, it can get sweaty, but in sub-zero temperatures, you'd rather sweat a little than wake up frozen to the floor. The key is layering smart. Materials breathe, hides aren't airtight. They trap heat without trapping everything. You shift, and the robe shifts with you, letting just enough fresh air creep in to stop you from cooking inside your own clothes. Here's a strange little fact. Some tribes would even place hot coals in a shallow bowl or stone pan and slide it under the bedding at night, a kind of ancient heating pad. Dangerous if done wrong, but warm beyond belief when handled with care. You haven't done that tonight. Your fire's steady enough, but the memory of it makes you smile. You once woke up with a warm stone tucked near your ribs and thought you'd been blessed by a sun spirit. There's a debate among anthropologists about whether these sleep layers, robes, leggings, wraps and tunics, were primarily for warmth, or whether they carried ceremonial weight as well. Some argue that winter garments were decorated with intentional patterns, not just for beauty but for protection, against spirits, illness or bad dreams. Others say that's overthinking it, that people were practical, and when it's 30 below and the wind's howling like a banshee, no one's worried about symbolism. They're worried about their toes. But you've seen both. You've seen your aunt add tiny quillwork symbols onto her winter robe, a turtle, a lightning bolt, a star. You've seen your grandmother whisper a prayer while tying her belt. These things mean something, even if their primary job is to keep you from turning into an icicle. You shift again, trying not to wake anyone. The floor beneath you is layered with skins, but you can still feel the cold earth through it. It's a solid reminder that you're one thin buffalo hide away from the frozen ground. You tuck your knees up, making yourself smaller, tighter. You feel a warmth at your back. Your mother must have scooted closer in her sleep. Her robe brushes yours, and just like that, the cold becomes more bearable. That's another trick no one talks about. Human contact. You don't cuddle per se, there's no spooning in a family lodge, but proximity is everything. The more bodies sharing heat, the warmer the air inside the teepee. Your breath, your skin, your closeness, all of it turns the lodge into a small living ecosystem. It's not luxury, but it's alive. Outside, the storm rages on. You can hear it grinding its icy teeth across the plains, clawing at the hide walls like it's trying to find a seam. You're layered, swaddled. You're pretty sure your breath is fogging up the air inside your own robe, but that's a good sign. It means you're not freezing. And even though your clothes are stiff in places from the cold, even though your face is dry and your lips are starting to crack from the constant blast of wind-chapped air, you're surviving. More than that, you're sleeping. Not deeply, not peacefully, but enough. Enough to dream a little, even if you can't remember what about. One final thought floats through your brain before sleep drags you under again. Every single person in this lodge is wearing their life. Every stitch, every hide, every scrap of fur is a piece of knowledge passed down. Not from textbooks, but from need. From nights just like this one. You close your eyes, your robe shifts slightly, and you disappear into the layers, where the cold can't find you. You're warm enough to dream now, not vividly, not the deep kaleidoscope kind, but the soft, rolling sort of dreams that drift in and out, woven between the crackle of the fire and the low moan of the wind outside. And just before your mind fully sinks into sleep again, your stomach growls. Not a little polite grumble either. A full-on winter hollow echoing hunger beast that makes you wince and instinctively pull the robe tighter. You try to ignore it, try to tell your body not now, but it doesn't care. It wants food even in the dead of night, especially in the dead of night, when the storm is still throwing icy fists at the world and your body's burning fuel like a runaway sled. Welcome to the underappreciated art of midnight snacking in survival mode. You're not about to get up and cook a stew, obviously, that would be madness, but you do remember the small pouch tucked near the bedding, stuffed with dried bison meat and a few frozen berries from earlier in the evening. You reach for it carefully, trying not to wake the person next to you. Your fingers brush the pouch, stiff with the cold but familiar, and you tug it close, easing it open and pulling out a thin strip of jerky. You chew in the dark, slow and quiet. The meat is tough, smoky and slightly sweet with rendered fat. It's not a feast, but your body doesn't need a feast. It needs calories. Simple, dense, no-frills energy. In this cold, your body's running a furnace at full blast. Just lying here, wrapped in furs, trying to sleep. That's work. Your heart's thudding faster, your blood's moving faster, your skin's leaking heat into the air with every breath. And if you don't replace those burned calories, you'll wake up sluggish, shivering, and dangerously close to hypothermic. That's why winter bedtime routines always include a snack, whether it's a strip of meat, a ball of pemmican, or a few roasted pine nuts pressed into a ball with fat. It's not indulgence, it's insurance. There's even a science to it. Some survival experts today talk about how eating fat before bed slows digestion and helps your body maintain warmth longer. Your ancestors figured this out without needing a lecture on metabolism. They just knew. Eat before sleep or you'll wake up cold and miserable. You glance around the lodge. It's quiet. Everyone's deep into the early hours of night, that still moment when the fire dips low and even the wind seems to catch its breath. But you know they've all eaten too. You remember your grandmother passing around small food bundles earlier? Nothing fancy, just bits of dried meat and fat-packed mixtures that travel well and burn slow. There's no cooking during a storm like this. No boiling of pots or steaming soup bowls. Just the silent routine of chewing in the dark, refueling the machine so it doesn't shut down in the night. You take another bite, tearing the meat slowly, letting your jaw do the work. Your teeth ache a little, the cold has crept into them, but you chew anyway. And with each bite you feel a little more grounded. Like you've reminded your body it's not alone, that it's got a job to do and you're here to help. Here's a slightly quirky fact for you. Some families believed that eating certain things before sleep could influence dreams. Not always in a mystical way, though those stories exist, but more in the don't eat rabbit before bed unless you want to dream about running sort of way. Others believed that high-fat meals helped bring dreams of ancestors, or allowed the body to travel in dreams more easily. Whether you buy into that or not, it adds a layer of meaning to this quiet midnight snack. There's also an ongoing discussion among historians about how nutrition during winter affected not just survival, but mood, memory, and even spiritual health. Starvation changes people, it frays nerves, dulls thinking, crushes morale. But being fit even a little keeps the mind sharper, the heart steadier. It gives you the strength not just to survive, but to believe in surviving. It's no wonder that winter food, especially high-fat foods, were guarded like treasure, and shared, always shared, because a lodge without food is a tomb. Your pouch is nearly empty now. You shake out the last few crumbs of dried berry and fat, then tuck it back near your bedding. You feel the warmth return to your limbs, not like a fire, but like a glow, slow and steady. Your body's already getting back to work, digesting, converting, sending that energy where it's needed most. Outside, the wind picks up again. Another howl, another round of snow hammering the teepee. But inside, your fire is still alive. The bodies around you still radiate warmth, and your own stomach, no longer empty, settles down into sleep mode again. You curl onto your side, wrap the robe tighter, and let your breathing slow. The storm can rage all it wants. You've got meat in your belly and fur on your back. Let it snow. You're dreaming again, but it's the strange kind, the kind winter pulls from deep places. Shapes swirl behind your eyelids, drifting snowflakes that shift into running bison. A flicker of fire that grows into the sun, a set of eyes glowing in the trees. It's not frightening exactly, but something about it feels watched. Not in a creepy way, more like someone standing just outside your circle, quiet, patient, waiting. You stir slightly, not quite awake, not quite asleep. Then you hear it. Not the wind, not the fire, something else, a low rhythmic breath just outside the teepee wall. A crunch in the snow, maybe the creak of rawhide under shifting weight. You freeze, your ears suddenly wide awake. Your body doesn't move, but your senses reach out like antennae. You know this sound. You've heard it before. It's the unmistakable footfall of something alive moving near the lodge and not human. You open your eyes in the dark, heart thudding. You're not panicking, just alert. Tense in that deeply animal way, tuned to survival like a bowstring drawn and waiting. Then you hear another sound, a low growl, barely audible, then silence. A dog, your dog probably, sounding the first warning. And just like that you remember, this is why someone always stays awake. This is why winter nights in the teepee aren't fully safe, no matter how thick the hides, no matter how strong the fire. Because out there in the storm, you're not alone. Sometimes it's wolves, sometimes it's desperate scavengers, and sometimes, if you ask the old ones, it's something older than wolves. Something that walks upright and knows your name. Your grandfather is awake. Of course he is. He sits slowly, no panic in his movements, just a quiet alertness honed over decades of nights like this. He doesn't speak, he doesn't need him to. The silence between you says everything. There's no flurry of movement, no waking the whole lodge. That's not how it's done. Instead, he reaches for his bow, which rests beside his bedding, and slides it quietly across his lap. He doesn't nock an arrow, just holds it, watches the flap, listens. Outside, the wind roars again, masking the smaller noises. Maybe it was just a coyote. Maybe the wind played tricks on your ears, but no one takes that chance. Not when food is scarce and the cold drives predators closer to the edge. Here's the thing most people don't realise. When you live like this, you're always sharing space with other things, not just animals, stories, spirits, shadows. You grow up knowing that the edge of the firelight isn't a hard border. It's a suggestion. And sometimes things lean just past that line. curious watching. In some families, one person volunteers to take the night watch, a role not formally assigned but always understood. Usually an elder, someone who wakes easily and sleeps lightly. Tonight it's you or grandfather. He's not scared, just aware. His job isn't just to keep the fire going, it's to see what might try to step in from the dark. And not just physical threats. Here's a quirky fringe-side fact. Many plains tribes believe that certain spirits roamed more freely during storms. The wind carried more than snow, it carried voices. Some good, some not. The flap of the teepee was more than a door. It was a threshold between this world and others. So subscared, you don't leave it unguarded, not even when it's latched tight. Your grandfather finally murmurs something in the dark, a phrase too quiet to hear clearly. A blessing, a warning, maybe both. He leans forward, tosses a bit of sage onto the fire. It sizzles, releases a burst of pungent smoke that curls into the rafters and clings to the hides. You recognize the smell instantly. Sharp, earthy, cleansing. It smells like old prayers. Somewhere near the back of the teepee, the dog shifts again and growls once more, softer this time. No barking, no lunging, just a low rumble, the kind that says, "I smell it too." You're fully awake now, heart still racing, mind flicking through all the possible visitors outside. A lone wolf, sniffing for food? Maybe. A bobcat, rare but possible. Or something else. Something wearing the storm like a cloak. Some anthropologists scoff at the stories. They'll tell you the old tales of winter spirits and night walkers were just cautionary devices, warnings to keep kids inside to prevent wandering during blizzards. They say the stories are metaphors, but the people who live them, they don't all agree. Your grandmother says she once heard something speak her name in the wind. Just once, one syllable, clear as day, when she was 15 and alone in a storm just like this one. She still won't sleep with her back to the flap. Outside the wind shifts. You listen, breath held. A few heartbeats pass, then a crunch. Not wind, not snow falling from the trees. Footsteps, slow, measured, and then silence. The dog lets out a sharp, sudden bark. Then it goes quiet again. Your grandfather stands now. Not fast, calm. He steps softly toward the door. Bow in hand, not to fight, just to look. He unfastens the flap just enough to peek through. Cold rushes in like an eager guest, biting your face and fingers. Grit your teeth, and everyone in the lodge shifts in their sleep. No one fully wakes, but they feel it too. That old familiar whisper. Something's outside. Your grandfather lowers the flap. Gone, he says softly, not to reassure, but just to state the truth as he knows it. He returns to his place, sets the bow down, reaches for another log, places it on the coals. Sparks jump, dancing upward. The lodge glows a little warmer. You lie back down, heart still thumping. The dog curls up again, still alert, still growling in its dreams. Outside the wind howls again, but this time it sounds like it's laughing. You don't sleep deeply after that, not because you're scared, but because something out there knows your name. The storm shifts around dawn, not by stopping, oh no, it's far too stubborn for that, but by quieting, just enough to let the world take a breath. The wind loses its edge, the kind of slicing, throat-hunting sharpness it had all night, and settles into a low hum, steady and persistent. It's still snowing. You can hear the gentle hiss of flakes landing softly on top of earlier layers, each one burying the last until the whole prairie outside becomes a smooth rounded blanket of white. But for a moment, the pressure inside the teepee lightens. The air feels different, like the storm has blinked. You're not quite awake, not fully asleep either. Your eyes are still closed, but your mind has returned. It's drifting somewhere between dreams and memory, and everything feels muffled, slow. The fire's still burning, not as strong as before, but alive, and the faint orange glow dances across the inside of your robe. It's the kind of light that feels like it's whispering, you made it through the worst of it. But what you notice most in this moment isn't the fire or the warmth, it's the sound of snow. That may sound silly, snow doesn't make a sound, but when you live close to it, under it, inside it, you start to hear it. The way it rests, the way it presses in, the way the world gets quieter when it falls thick and fast. Snow isn't loud, but it changes everything else that is. Right now you can feel the weight of it pressing down on the teepee, pulling on the hide coverings with a soft, insistent hand. Occasionally the poles creak and shift, not in alarm, just to adjust to the growing pressure. Somewhere above your head, a heavy clump of snow slides off the outer wall and lands with a soft thump, sending a cold shiver through the floor. The lodge settles again. This too is part of sleeping in a teepee during a brutal snowstorm, the sound of almost silence, a kind of hushed world that blankets even your thoughts. The howling wind of earlier has retreated, and what's left behind is something stranger. A stillness so deep it feels alive. Your ears tune into every tiny detail. The scratch of hide shifting as someone stirs under their robe, the faint click of a coal splitting in the fire, a slow exhale from your grandmother, even your own breathing, fogging lightly in the cold air just above your lips. There's something sacred about this quiet, like the storm has taken everything noisy and left you with just being. You let your breath slow, you listen. Here's a surprising historical note, not often written about, but whispered among winter survivors. Snowstorms like this weren't just dangerous, they were cleansing. Many believed that when a storm howled all night and then left this kind of eerie, soundless morning in its wake, it had driven something away. Spirits, sickness, bad luck. It wiped the land clean, even as it buried it. And that made mornings like this holy. You're not religious, not in the way some might be, but you feel it. That sacred hush. The way everything inside the lodge, the fire, the people, even the dog is quieter. Like they know this Tanlinna isn't empty. It's earned. Even the dog has stopped growling. It's lying still now, ears perked, nose twitching occasionally as if sniffing the storm's aftermath. You reach out and rest your hand gently on its back. Its warmth pulses beneath your fingers. Still here, still guarding, still breathing. One of your cousins lets out a soft, sleepy yawn, the kind that turns into a little whimper at the end. You smile into your robe and let your eyes close again. Not to sleep, but just to rest inside this moment. It won't last long. Soon someone will feed the fire. Someone will untie the flap and let the blinding light pour in. People will start moving, stretching, shaking the stiffness out of their legs and arms. But right now, this is the sweet spot between fear and action. A quiet, snowy pause. But the sound of snow isn't always comforting. Sometimes it tells you things you don't want to hear, like the weight piling up on the lodge, like the possibility that something or someone might be buried beneath it. In the far past, there are stories of lodges that collapsed under heavy drifts, of families caught asleep and swallowed whole. It's rare, but not impossible. That's why you listen. Always, always. And here's something both fascinating and slightly odd. Some elders swore they could tell the kind of snowstorm it was just by the way it sounded against the hide walls. Sharp flakes made a hiss, dry and fast like the grains of sand tossed by the wind. Wet snow slapped like thrown handfuls of mud. And heavy, thick snow, the kind you're under now, landed with a dull, soft weight, like sleep with teeth. No science backs this up directly, but you can't argue with experience. People who have survived 100 winters tend to know what they're talking about, even if they don't explain it in charts and graphs. You listen now, wondering what kind of storm this really is. You think it's not done yet, just resting, gathering itself for one final push before sunrise, but inside the lodge you feel protected. Not invincible, but deeply connected to the elements. The hide walls aren't just keeping the cold out, they're translating it. You can feel the storm's mood through them. It's no longer angry, just tired, just snow. Your grandfather finally moves. He doesn't say anything, but he does what he always does at this hour. Stirs the fire gently, nudging new coals into the centre, feeding the flames with a practiced hand. The light grows again. Shadows shift. The stillness bends slightly, allowing life to return. You stretch under your robe. Every muscle complains. Your hip is sore from the hard ground. Your fingers ache from gripping the hides too tightly in your sleep. Your nose is cold, but your core? Still warm, still beating, still here. The storm can't say the same, not yet. It's fading even if it doesn't know it. You close your eyes once more, not to sleep, but to hold on to the silence. Because sometimes the loudest thing you'll ever hear is snow not falling anymore. A sudden gust slams into the teepee with enough force to make the lodge poles shudder, and the hides ripple like sails caught in a storm. It's not just the wind, it's a reminder. The storm isn't gone. It was only taking a breath, and now it's back, louder, angrier, somehow more personal. The brief peace from earlier vanishes like smoke. You sit upright before you even think about it, heart hammering against your ribs. You can feel the air shift, cold fingers creeping under the edge of the lodge cover. Then comes the real gut punch. The flap. Your precious, thick, tightly bound front flap rips open, just like that. In one violent gust, the tie loosens, or maybe the rawhide snaps and the cold floods in like a living thing. Snow blasts through the opening. The fire flinches low with a hiss, and the temperature inside the lodge drops like a stone into a frozen river. Everything turns to motion. Your father is already on his feet, his shadow lunging for the open flap. He slams it shut against the wind, fumbling with the leather ties, fingers stiff and clumsy from sleep and cold. Your mother throws an extra robe over the kids. The dog barks, short panicked bursts, then retreats into a corner near the fire. The elders are sitting up now, blinking against the shock of icy air, not scared but alert. Everyone's awake. The emergency has arrived. Because out here, this is the equivalent of a wall falling off your house. A teepee without its flap is just a funnel for winter's fury. Every second that it stays open is a second you're losing heat. It doesn't sound like much, but when it's 40 below and the wind is moving at 30 miles per hour, you're dealing with frostbite speeds. Exposed skin goes numb in minutes. The fire gets bullied into submission. The warmth you've built up all night drains away like water through a broken bowl. You're not useless, though. You jump into action. You grab a spare robe, one of the thicker ones, and run to help your father reinforce the flap. Together, you push back against the wind and wedge the extra hide between the lodge and the flap's inner seam. It's not elegant. It's not neat. But it works. The wind hisses against it and gives up for now. Inside the lodge, everyone is still catching their breath. The fire is low but stable. The cold survived. That's huge, because if the fire had gone out, you'd be starting from scratch with numb fingers and lungs full of smoke and a growing sense of panic. Once the flap is tied down and patched, your father exhales, loudly, and returns to his spot. He says nothing, just nods. The kind of nod that means it could have been worse, and it could have. Here's what people forget about teepees. They're strong, but they're not indestructible. A snowstorm like this can turn the most carefully constructed lodge into a wind tunnel if you're not vigilant. That front flap is a lifeline, sure, but it's also a vulnerability. It has to open and close easily, that's its job, but that also makes it a weak point. If the rawhide ties dry out too much or freeze or just get old, they'll snap when you need them most, and then you're wide open to the wrath of the sky. There's actually a long-running debate among historians about just how often these emergency situations occurred. Some claim it was rare, that families were so in tune with their shelters they'd never let a flap come loose in the first place. Others argue that incidents like this happened regularly, especially during sudden shifts in the wind. The truth probably lives somewhere in the middle. Even the best setups have flaws. Even the most experienced people get surprised. What's more interesting is how communities responded to these moments. In some traditions, when a lodge failed, whether from wind, fire or snow, it wasn't seen as a personal failure but as a collective issue. Neighbours would step in, offer spare hides, help reinforce poles. Survival wasn't an individual sport out here. It was a team effort. You either all made it through winter, or no one did. That kind of solidarity is why right now, your mother is already checking the bedding for snow dampness, pulling back the wet edges and flipping hides so they'll dry from fire heat. Your grandmother hums quietly while laying out a new robe near the kids. No one yells, no one panics, you just respond. And the irony? In a strange way, moments like this warm you up. The flurry of activity, the rush of adrenaline, the movement, it gets your blood flowing again. You're sweating a little under your robe now, and your fingers tingle with returning circulation. The crisis might have stolen your sleep, but it gave you back your body. Still, the cold lingers. Even after the flap is resecured and the fire is fed, the inside of the lodge feels thinner. That one gust was enough to peel away the illusion of full safety. Now you're all back to working mode. No one fully relaxes. The air feels different, charged, like static after a lightning strike. You glance at the flap every few minutes, half expecting it to betray you again. Outside, the storm howls louder now, like it's laughing. You realise in that quiet moment of reflection that this is winter's way of reminding you where you stand. You're not in charge. You're borrowing space. The land allows your survival, but it doesn't promise it. You pull your robe tighter, sit back down beside the fire, and let the heat soak into your knees. You stare into the coals, eyes unfocused, and feel something deeper than fear settle in. Respect. Respect for the storm, respect for the lodge, respect for the generations that figured all this out so you wouldn't freeze to death in your sleep. It's not heroic, it's not cinematic, but it's survival. And in the teeth of a snowstorm, that's enough. Morning doesn't arrive like a sunrise. It sneaks in slow and pale, like a shy guest knocking at the edge of the storm. The teepee is dim but no longer pitch black. A faint bluish light filters through the hide walls, turning the smoke-stained ceiling into a dome of quiet shadows. You blink against the change, not quite ready to be awake, but too aware to go back to sleep. Around you, the lodge breathes. The fire is steady again. Everyone is resting, really resting, now that the flap's secure, and the snow seems to have softened its fury into something more manageable. But you know the morning routine is coming. It has to, because no matter how brutal the night, someone always steps outside first. And that someone might be you. You stretch slowly beneath your robe, feeling the stiffness in your joints and the pull of half-frozen muscles. Your back protests. Your knees are tight. The soles of your feet, pressed all night against thick fur and earth, ache with a dull cold. But it's time. You reach for your moccasins, which, thankfully, were tucked under your bedding to stay warm. They're still pliable, not frozen solid like bricks. You wiggle your toes into them and stand, and stepping toward the flap, you pause. There's a ritual to this. You don't just barge out, you listen first. Press your ear near the seam. The wind has calmed some, but it's still there. Steady, low, the sound of breath through pine needles. Then you pull back the flap carefully, and a rush of blinding light hits you. The world is white, not just snowy, but white. The kind of white that eats sound and shape and shadow. Everything outside the lodge is covered in a thick, smooth sheet of powder, undisturbed except for faint animal tracks and the ridges of snowdrifts climbing up the sides of neighbouring teepees. Your breath fogs instantly. Your eyelashes stick together. The cold stings your nose and bites your ears, and for one disoriented moment it feels like you're standing on another planet. And then you see them. Snowshoes, propped neatly against the side of the lodge where they were left the night before, waiting. Snowshoes in winter aren't just tools, they're lifelines. You walk anywhere without them in this kind of storm, and you're sinking up to your thighs with every step. It's not just exhausting, it's dangerous. You could fall, get stuck, and freeze before anyone hears you calling. But with snowshoes you become a different kind of creature, one that can glide over snow like it's solid ground. You grab a pair, go rawhide latticed over a bent wooden frame still dusted with snow, and begin lacing them over your moccasins. It's an art, tying them tight enough to hold, but not so tight they'll cut off circulation. Your hands are clumsy in the cold, but muscle memory kicks in. Once they're on, you feel a shift. Suddenly the snow isn't a trap, it's a path. You take a few tentative steps outside the lodge. The air is sharp, but the sky is finally clear. Blue peeks out overhead like a secret. You're the first footprints, the first to feel the snow that fell during the night. It crunches differently now. Yesterday's storm snow was light, erratic. This morning's snow is heavy, settled. Like it's made peace with the land. You make your way slowly to the communal area at the centre of the camp. The entire village is still wrapped in sleep. Most teepees are sealed tight, flaps covered with extra hides, snow piled around the bases for insulation. But a few show signs of stirring. One flap opens and a head pokes out. Your cousin, teeth chattering, nose red. He raises a hand in greeting and you nod back. There's no talking yet, just the universal expression of you made it too. In the centre you check on the water cache, buried beneath snow to keep it from freezing too fast. You brush off the drift, pry up the lid, and inspect the contents, still mostly ice. That's expected. But there's a bit of slush near the bottom. Enough to thaw. You leave it for whoever needs it first, then you turn to the horses. They're huddled together in the makeshift corral, wrapped in blankets stitched from old robes and canvas. Steam rises from their flanks as they breathe. Their eyes flick toward you, calm but tired. You walk the perimeter, checking ropes and knots. One line's half buried in snow, you dig it out. Another horse has nosed a hole in the snowdrift, looking for grass that isn't there. You pat his side gently and move on. They made it, just like you. Here's something most people forget. In winter camps, the snowshoes weren't just for humans. There were smaller versions made for dogs that helped pull loads, and even rudimentary hoof covers for horses in deep snow. Not fancy, just rawhide wraps to keep their hooves from icing over. It's that level of care, that level of innovation, that meant you could survive out here, not for days, but for months. There's a long-standing debate among historians and ethnographers about how consistently snowshoes were used across all plains tribes. Some argue they were rare, more common among the northern forest peoples. But stories, drawings, and even surviving artefacts suggest otherwise. Snowshoes, in one form or another, were common tools, especially in bad winters like this. They weren't symbols, they were shoes, and they were treated with the same reverence you'd give to your most trusted knife or bow. Back in the village, other flaps begin to open. More snowshoes crunch over snow. People greet each other quietly, voices muffled by scarves and cold. One man shakes out a heavy robe. A woman carries a bundle of firewood, already thinking about breakfast. Kids emerge slowly, blinking into the blinding morning. And just like that, the camp begins to wake. You walk back toward your lodge, wind tugging at your hood. The snowshoes make your steps long and light, and you marvel again at how different the world feels when you're not sinking with every stride. When you reach the teepee, your father's outside now too, tightening the flap's new lashings. He looks at you, nods once, then glances at the sky. Still snow coming, he says, but less angry. You smile. He's probably right. You stomp the snow from your shoes, duck back into the lodge, and feel the warmth hit your face like a memory. The fire's stronger now. Someone's added sage again. Your robe waits for you like an old friend. You slide back inside it, heartbeat slowing, lungs still full of snow-drenched air. Outside, the world is still frozen, still white. But you're moving again. And you've got snowshoes by the door, just in case. You lie back down beside the fire, snow still clinging to the fringe of your leggings, melting slowly into little beads that slide down and vanish into the fur-lined bedding beneath you. The brief burst of movement, stepping out, checking the camp, the horses, the cache, has left your body buzzing with heat, like your blood remembered its job. But now, in the stillness again, you feel the cold trying to sneak its way back in. So you pull your robe tighter, curl your knees toward your chest, and stare up through the teepee's smoke hole. The wind's eased for now, just like your father said. You can see the sky again, barely, a pale wash of blue just visible beyond the smoke drifting upward. There are stars, faint but stubborn, and higher still, a single hawk feather wisp of cloud. You blink, then blink again, realizing something quietly magical. The storm has finally passed, not retreated, not paused. Passed. The snow still lies thick and deep outside, but the wind has lost its bite, and the sharpness in the air has softened. It's not warm, not even close, but the worst is over. That's when your grandmother begins to speak. Her voice is soft, barely above a whisper, and you almost miss it at first. But then the cadence reaches you. She's not talking to anyone in particular, just speaking into the space around the fire, like a song humming itself into existence. You recognize the rhythm. She's telling a story, and suddenly the lodge feels different. Everyone shifts subtly. No one says a word, no one even moves more than a breath or a stretch. But all ears tune in. It's the unwritten rule of winter nights and post-storm mornings. If someone begins a story, you listen. Her voice is steady, though raspy with age, and it dances over the coals like smoke. She's telling the old one again, the story of the hunter who followed a glowing spirit across the frozen plain, only to realize it wasn't a spirit at all, but the soul of his long-dead brother, come back to guide him home through the snow. It's a good story, a heavy one, and you've heard it before more than once. But something about it tonight feels different. The storm's fresh in your bones, the flap flapping open in the middle of the night. The unseen visitor who crunched the snow just beyond your reach. The eerie stillness. All of it has primed you to hear this story again, not as entertainment, but as insulation. That's the strange thing about these stories. They're not just filler for long nights. They're warmth. Real, functional warmth. The same way a buffalo robe traps body heat, a good winter tale traps hope. It gives you shape and meaning when everything outside is trying to erase you. The story wraps around you, sentence by sentence, and you find your breathing slowing. You're no longer tracking every creak of the lodge poles. You're not glancing at the flap. You're picturing the glowing spirit, the snow swirling around him, the brother stumbling after him in blind faith. And suddenly, the weight of the night seems a little lighter. There's a fringe fact tucked in here, if you're paying attention. Oral storytelling in winter wasn't just tradition, it was survival tech. In some tribes, specific stories were only allowed during the cold months. Not because of rules, but because of belief. The stories were alive, and in the warmer seasons, when the land was growing and things were buzzing and awake, the stories were said to wander, to leave, but in winter, they came home. They sat by the fire with you, wrapped in smoke and memory. Some scholars have tried to quantify this, track how winter tales affected mental health and morale, decision-making. They've found patterns. Kids who knew the stories were more alert, more resilient. Adults who told them were more respected, more grounded, but the data misses the point. You don't tell stories in a teepee during a snowstorm because of what they do. You tell them because of who they are. Right now, your grandmother isn't just sharing a tale. She's feeding the fire in your minds, giving shape to the invisible. And honestly, it's warmer now. Not physically, maybe. But inside your ribs, something has uncurled. Your cousin, the littlest one, lets out a sigh and rests her head on her mother's lap. Your brother stops fiddling with the edge of his robe and stares at the fire. The dog stretches, rolls over and lets out a snort. Even the flames seem to listen. When the story ends, when the glowing spirit guides the hunter to the edge of the village and then vanishes in a gust of snow, there's silence. The kind of good silence that happens when everyone is holding the last image in their heads and doesn't want to breathe too loud in case it scares it away. Then your grandmother leans back, wraps her robe tighter, and says nothing else. She's done. You glance up through the smoke hole again. A streak of dawn finally makes itself known, lighting the sky with pale peach and silver. The first real light you've seen in hours. The snow outside begins to reflect it, turning everything white gold. Beautiful, cold, eternal. You know the day ahead will be hard, digging out the camp, checking supplies, Dolly. Warming limbs, stiff from sleeping in a meat locker. But right now you have this story, this silence, this shared moment, and the knowledge that no matter how brutal the storm, morning always comes, and when it does, the first voice you hear might just be a whisper from a warm place, telling you that even the snow can't silence everything. A soft cough breaks the silence, followed by the creak of someone shifting under their robe. The spell of the story lingers, but the teepee is slowly waking again, more fully this time. Not just the momentary alertness from earlier when the flap blew open or the storm roared, but the actual full-body shuffle of people preparing for the long work of day. But one set of movements is different, smaller, slower. Your eyes follow the sound to the youngest child in the lodge, your cousin, the smallest one, barely 4 winters old. She's curled up near the far wall under a heavy hide, only her nose and forehead showing, and she's not stirring like the others. Your aunt leans over her gently, brushing hair from her face. She whispers something, leans closer, then presses her lips to the girl's cheek. You watch the tension melt from her shoulders in an instant, a breath of relief. The child is warm. That right there? That's winter's razor edge. You can prepare all you want. Wrap every limb in hide, stack firewood to the ceiling, eat until your stomach aches, and keep the fire burning like a heartbeat. But when the cold decides to challenge your youngest, your smallest, your most vulnerable, you feel it deep. Because in a teepee during a snowstorm, nothing tests you more than protecting your children. You remember when she was born, one of those middle-of-the-night arrivals, the kind that always feels dramatic whether it was or not. It was summer then, warm, full of grass and light. You'd never imagined the same small body, now fighting off winter's bite, was once swaddled in nothing but softened buckskin and laughter. And now she sleeps like a curled sprout in a field of frost, breathing softly while the wind hisses just beyond the lodge wall. It's a miracle, honestly, how children survive nights like this. Not because of luck, because of systems. Everything about how children sleep during winter storms is intentional. They're wrapped in the warmest furs, always placed between adults who radiate heat like living furnaces. The bedding beneath them is doubled up, soft rabbit skins below and heavier buffalo hides above. They don't lie near the door ever, no exceptions, not even for the tough little boys who think they're warriors already. They sleep in the warm heart of the lodge, ringed with bodies that would throw themselves into the fire before letting the cold win. And their clothes? It's a masterclass in layering. Your little cousin is wrapped in a long tunic of rabbit fur with mittens sewn to the sleeves. Her moccasins are double-lined, tied tight at the ankle, and inside, there's a pouch of downy grass packed around her toes. Just a handful, but enough to keep the chill from creeping in. You smile, remembering your own winters as a small child, waking up buried under so many hides that it felt like digging out of a snowdrift just to see the fire. You remember your mother's hand on your chest at night, checking to make sure you were still warm. The way her body curved around yours like a shield. You didn't fully understand it then, you do now. Even the dog plays a role. Not a joke, not a novelty, an actual layer of protection. They're always near the children, curled up at their feet or backs, taking the edge off the cold. Your people bred dogs not just for pulling or herding, but for this. Warmth, loyalty, proximity. Even now, the old mutt in your lodge has shifted closer to the girl in the night, a warm loaf of fur just inches from her tiny hands. There's a quirky old belief among the elders that children in winter carry extra spirit protection, that the cold can't touch them as easily because they haven't yet forgotten how to speak to the world, that their dreams are still clean, and their breath carries warmth stronger than grown people's. It's part comfort, part ritual, but when you see a small child make it through a blizzard night without even stirring, it's tempting to believe. But no one rests on that belief. No one assumes. Every child gets checked, rewrapped, pulled closer if needed. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes you hear of one that doesn't wake up, not because someone failed, but because nature doesn't always play fair. And when that happens, it marks a family, a season, a generation. There's a quiet debate among historians about infant and child mortality in these conditions. Some claim the rates were no worse than elsewhere in the pre-industrial world. Others suggest that extreme winters culled the population in subtle but persistent ways. But the truth, as always, is more complicated, because statistics don't account for the effort, the layers, the vigilance, the hands that never stop checking, the mothers who sleep with only one eye closed, the fathers who warm stones and tuck them under bedding before lying down, the siblings who roll over even in sleep to share heat. This isn't just parenting, it's a team effort, a camp-wide strategy. Your grandmother has checked on your cousin 3 times tonight, and she's not even her direct kin. It doesn't matter. In the lodge, children are everyone's, and when they wake up, safe, warm, eyes blinking against the firelight, it's the victory no one claps for. No fanfare, just a quiet moment of we made it another night. Your cousin stirs now, eyes fluttering open. She doesn't cry, just looks around, sees her mother's kept face, and smiles the sleep-heavy smile of someone who knows nothing outside the warm hides of this little universe. She says something half-mumbled, a name maybe, or a dream, and her mother pulls her close again. The child curls in tighter and closes her eyes. You lean your head back against the padded wall, letting the warmth of the fire and the shape of that moment settle into your chest. Because this is the heart of winter survival. Not the fire, not the hides, not the snowshoes or flap ties or vigilance, but this tiny life, still breathing, still dreaming, wrapped in a universe of warmth and love inside a lodge made of skin and smoke. Later that morning, as more people emerge from their lodges, and the camp begins to shake the frost from its bones, a question drifts into your mind, one that seems simple on the surface but burrows deeper the longer you sit with it. Why a teepee? Why this conical, skin-wrapped, fire-scented structure as the weapon of choice against a snowstorm that could snap a tree in half and freeze your lungs in 5 minutes flat? You've lived inside one your whole life, grown up with the sound of wind testing its seams and snow stacking against its base. But only now, after a storm like that, do you wonder how it compares to the other tools people have used to outsmart winter? Because somewhere far from here, beyond the trees and rivers and plains you know so well, another kind of shelter waits. A structure made not of hide and pole, but of packed snow and igloo. Let's not pretend it's the same. The teepee and the igloo, 2 radically different responses to the same deadly question. How do you sleep when the cold wants to kill you? You've never been inside an igloo yourself, but you've heard stories. Stories of Inuit hunters in the far north carving domes from the snow itself, stacking blocks in spirals until the walls curve inward, forming a perfect vault of ice. A shelter made entirely from what you're supposed to avoid. No firewood, no animal hide, just snow, skill and body heat. The first time you heard that, it sounded impossible. It still kind of does. The comparison is irresistible. On paper, the igloo seems like a marvel. It seals in warmth like an oven, especially when lined with caribou hide and backed with frozen slabs of meat and gear. The entrance is a tunnel, low and curved, designed to trap warm air inside while forcing cold air to settle at the bottom. Snow, though cold, becomes an insulator once it's packed tight enough. It's the enemy turned ally. And yet you can't imagine trading your teepee for one, because this lodge isn't just a clever invention, it's a home. The teepee breathes. It shifts with the wind. Its smoke hole lets you see the stars. The hides, heavy with the memory of the animals they once were, hold warmth and meaning. It's a space of motion, taken down and packed when the herds move, then reassembled like a living being, its poles raised in a dance older than any map. There's rhythm in its construction, memory in every lash of sinew, every quilled flap tie. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite their differences, the teepee and the igloo are solving the same problem from different angles. They're both portable in their own way, the igloo temporary and rebuilt from what's around. The teepee carried from place to place like a snail's shell. Both keep you alive in places where death comes quickly. Both draw a circle around your body and say, "Not tonight, winter." There's a scholarly debate, a loud one, depending on which books you open, about which structure was more effective. Some argue the igloo was superior in coldest conditions, holding in heat longer, sealing out wind completely. Others praise the teepee for its versatility, its mobility, its fire-centered design. After all, you can't build an igloo on dry grassland, and you can't pack your igloo up and follow the bison trail. Still, it's fascinating how different these worlds can be. Snow shelter versus hide tent. Both elegant, both necessary, both rooted in their people's rhythms and landscapes. You imagine for a moment what it would be like to sleep in an igloo. The silence, for one, would be total. No creaking poles, no hide flapping, just the stillness of packed snow, pressing in from all sides, muffling the world. Maybe it would feel safe. Maybe it would feel like being buried. You wonder how they managed fire inside. You've heard they used oil lamps, seal fat burning slowly in carved stone bowls with moss for wicks. A smaller flame, a quieter one. Not the lively, smoke-belching fire in your teepee, but a careful little glow, watched with the same reverence. Maybe they had stories too, told low in the glow of whale oil light. Maybe they layered their children in furs, checked on them in the night, probed the walls wouldn't collapse. Maybe they're not so different. It makes you think about adaptation in a new way, not just as survival, but as conversation. Your people spoke with the wind, the snow, the animals, and designed the teepee as an answer. The Inuit spoke with the sea ice and silence and designed the igloo as theirs. Different dialects of the same language, cold, and both of them have this one important thing in common. They trust their builders. A teepee is only as strong as the hands that raised it. An igloo is only as warm as the person who carved its blocks. You glance around your lodge again, now fully awake, the light rising outside. The fire is stronger. The flap is holding. Your family moves quietly, not yet speaking much, but moving in unison like a body stretching after sleep. You don't know how to build an igloo, but you do know how to tie a teepee's door flap so it holds against the wind. You know how to adjust the smoke hole to keep the fire breathing. You know which hides to put closest to the wall and which to save for the babies. And that knowledge feels sacred, not in a fragile way, in a sturdy, snow-tested way. You wrap your robe tighter and shift closer to the fire. Teepee or igloo, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe what really matters is the same thing both shelters protect, the people inside. At some point after sunrise, when the fire is roaring again and the cold outside has lost its sharpest teeth, you find yourself staring at the edge of your robe, the tip of one finger poking out, pale and wrinkled. It tingles as the blood comes back, that familiar sting of cold giving way to warmth. You rub your hands together slowly, not because you're freezing anymore, but because you're thinking about how close your body came to the line last night. That invisible, terrifying line between sleep and something else. Hypothermia. It's not a word your ancestors used, but they knew it intimately. You've heard the stories passed around fires like cautionary tales, of people who simply lay down and didn't get back up, who closed their eyes just for a moment and never opened them again. You don't need a science lesson to understand it. You've felt the edge. Everyone who's lived through a real winter has. The danger isn't the cold itself, it's the trick the cold plays, the way it starts with teeth and ice and pain, then slowly turns numb, and then strangely warm. Comforting even. like a lullaby. That's the worst part. The most dangerous cold doesn't scream, it whispers. You remember one winter when a young man from another camp wandered too far into the snow to check on the horses. He was healthy, experienced, wrapped in hides, but the wind picked up fast. When they found him the next day, he was curled under a tree, arms crossed like he was sleeping, a faint smile on his face. The cold hadn't attacked him, it had seduced him. That memory rises uninvited as you flex your fingers again, or letting them hover over the fire. You start counting your body, not in the usual way, but in the winter way. How are your toes? Still sore but not numb. Knees? Achy but mobile. Fingertips? Tingling sure but functional. No grey patches, no frostbite. Your cheeks are cracked from windburn and your lips are split in two places. But all in all, you're still firmly in the land of the living. Not everyone is so lucky. That's the thing people underestimate about sleeping in a teepee during a brutal snowstorm. You don't just have to fight the cold once, you fight it over and over again, every hour, every movement, every pause in breath. Even sleep is a risk. That's why no one sleeps too deeply during a storm. Because sleep and death start to look similar when your body temperature dips just a few degrees. There's an old trick you learned from your grandfather, one he swore saved his life during the winter of broken trees. Before falling asleep, you eat something fatty, pemmican, dried meat, whatever's left. Then you wrap hot stones from the fire in a cloth and tuck them near your liver and groin. It's not about comfort, it's strategy. Keep the heat where it matters most, at your core, where the blood flows thickest. And the bedding? That's its own science. Layered hides? Yes. But also dried grass, crushed pine needles, even spare clothing tucked between layers to trap warmth. You sleep on top of fire-warmed earth, not directly on the frozen ground. Always remember that. The ground is colder than the air. Most hypothermia doesn't come from the wind. It creeps up from below. You glance at the wall of the lodge. It's frosted around the base where the inner liner didn't quite catch all the drafts. Tiny icicles dangle from one corner where snow leaked in during the night. You spot them and make a mental note. Patch that spot before the next storm, because you know there will be a next one. You've seen what happens when people underestimate the cold. A single open flap, a missed ember in the fire, a robe that slips off in the night. That's all it takes. And the worst part? The moment you think you're safe, truly safe, is the moment the cold gets clever. Here's something many people don't realise. Hypothermia isn't always dramatic. It doesn't always come with blue lips and shivering. Sometimes it shows up as confusion, a loss of coordination. A person starts mumbling, makes mistakes, thinks they're warm when they're not. That's why elders are always watching, not just out of love, but out of training. They know the signs. They've buried people who didn't make it. They refuse to let it happen again. There's an ongoing conversation among survivalists and cold weather researchers about how Indigenous communities manage to avoid large-scale deaths from exposure. The data says it should have happened more often. But the stories say otherwise. The stories speak of people who knew how to sleep through the cold, not by chance, by vigilance. Your family is one of them. Even last night, in the worst of it, the system held. Someone always near the fire, someone always checking the bedding, the dog always alert, no one too proud to accept another layer. And when the flap blew open, you didn't panic. You responded. That's the difference between surviving winter and losing to it. You hear your uncle outside now, knocking snow off the roof poles with a long stick. The sound is steady, practiced. Each whomp of falling snow relieves pressure from the structure, keeps it from collapsing under weight. It's another layer of prevention, another habit carved from long memory. The fire crackles as your grandfather adds a new log. He glances at you and says, almost as if he read your thoughts, "Don't sleep too deep, even when it's over." You nod. You understand, because even now, when the sky is clear and the camp is stirring and people are laughing again and snow is melting slightly from the rising sun, even now, you know the cold isn't gone. It's just stepped back, hiding in the corners of the world, waiting for someone to relax. You won't. Not tonight. Not any night until the trees bud again and the geese return and the robes get hung away for summer. Until then, you'll sleep lightly, eat often, move smarter, because winter doesn't stop and it just pauses. And if you're not ready, you might sleep and never wake. Later in the morning, after the flap has been secured for good and the fire has chased away the last chill from your fingers and toes, a quiet buzz stirs inside the teepee, subtle but unmistakable. Your aunt is digging through a bundle near her bedding, the soft rustle of fur and cloth spilling out in waves. Your uncle is going through the inventory pouch, counting something with slow, deliberate hands. Your grandmother, still seated near the fire, is eyeing the extra robes folded in the corner like a hawk. There's a quiet tension in the room. No one says it out loud, but everyone's thinking the same thing. It's time to talk about the furs. Buffalo, elk, deer, rabbit, muskrat, bear. The skins you sleep under, wear, walk in, and survive with aren't just insulation. They're currency, wealth, reputation, and in the cold they become everything. Right now, as your family prepares for the next wave of cold or the next stretch of snow, they're reassessing the most valuable assets in the entire lodge. You shift in your bedding and glance down at the robe wrapped around your shoulders. Buffalo hide, of course, smoked and softened, fur still thick and dark in most places, though the edges have seen better winters. A few patches are worn thin from years of use. You know it's not your best robe. You also know it's warmer than some people ever get. There's a quiet pecking order when it comes to winter furs. It isn't formal or spoken, but everyone knows it. The elders get the thickest buffalo robes, the ones that still smell faintly of the prairie and creek mud. The children get rabbit fur and soft-lined sleeping sacks made from layers of deer hide and trade cloth if any's around. The hunters get lighter robes, easier to move in, trimmed with fox or coyote. And then there are the premium pieces, the bear robes, the beaver-lined hoods, the full-length wolf cloaks with jaws still intact. Those are rare, and when they come out people notice. You've seen it happen, someone entering another lodge with a new fur draped across their shoulders, and suddenly the whole room goes chant. People glance, not rudely, but with the respect you'd give someone wearing a thunderstorm, because those furs didn't come easy, they cost something, whether in trade, sweat or blood. This morning the furs are being sorted and assessed for warmth, damage, and potential use. Your aunt holds up a piece of buffalo hide and frowns at the edge. A small rip, mended once before, now reopening. She doesn't sigh or complain, she just sets it aside for patching. Every hide can be repaired up to a point. You help too, carefully folding the robes, stacking them by use, sleeping, wearing, wrapping the children. Each one tells a story. Some have decorative beading or quill work, almost worn away now but still visible under the soot and use. Others are plain, utilitarian, meant for warmth and nothing else. And then you spot it. Your grandfather's winter robe. It's draped across his lap, thick as a snowdrift, made from the hide of a buffalo that took 3 arrows to drop and almost dragged a man across the river before it finally fell. You remember when he received it? You were younger then, and you watched as the robe was handed to him like a crown, not because he asked, because he'd earned it. Now he folds it across his shoulders again, slowly. You know he'll offer it to one of the children if they get cold. He always does, but not yet. For now it stays with him. Here's something people often forget when they talk about Indigenous winter survival: the thermal economy of fur. Every robe has a role, every hide has a value, not just in comfort, but in survival math. Who sleeps warmest, who walks farthest in the snow, who tends the fire, and who has to leave the lodge to break trail through drifts. And these decisions aren't made lightly. They're made with care, with balance, with an understanding that everyone has different needs. That's why elders don't get the best robes just because they're respected. They get them because they feel the cold in their bones, because their fingers ache before anyone else's, because they've given enough to be protected now. And children don't get extra layers because they're fragile. They get them because they're the future. Because if one child doesn't make it through a winter, that's a thread lost in the great weave of everything. There's a fringe fact, maybe folklore, maybe not, that in some winters, when trade was lean and buffalo were scarce, families would rank hides in order of warmth. Not value, warmth. They'd test them side by side, wrapping hot stones in each one, waiting to see which held heat longest. The robe that stayed warmest? That went to the youngest or the oldest. The rest got creative. You've heard of people stuffing furs with dried moss, feathers, even strips of bark in a pinch. Anything to stretch the heat. Nothing was wasted. A single squirrel's skin might line a baby's boots. A bit of rabbit hide could be tucked behind a cracked flap seam. Every scrap helped. There's debate among researchers, of course there is, about how accurate those oral traditions are. Some claim it's romanticised, that hides weren't rationed with such precision. Others argue the opposite, that Indigenous people had the most advanced cold-weather clothing systems of any culture on the continent at the time. And honestly, you'd bet your robe on that being true. Because right now, as the furs are sorted and the fire burns low, you can feel the intelligence behind every piece. This isn't just leather and fluff, it's strategy, it's legacy. And when the next storm comes, and it will, you know exactly which robe you'll reach for, not the newest, not the prettiest, the one that's been through storms before, the one that smells like smoke and remembers every breath you took inside it. You help stack the last pile of hides near the door. Snow is falling again, just lightly, but the message is clear. Time to layer up. Later that afternoon, the snow finally stops falling for real. Not just a pause, not a tease, but a true stillness that settles over the land like a sigh. It's not quiet, not exactly. The wind still whispers through the frozen grass, and the trees still creak under their icy coats, but the aggressive edge of the storm is gone. What's left is the kind of silence that only comes after surviving something. A respectful hush, like the world's holding a moment of awe for everyone still breathing. Inside the teepee, the fire is steady again, almost cheerful, its heat stretching up into the rafters in slow curls. Everyone is busy. The kids are playing quietly near the far wall, poking at each other with bits of kindling and pretending to be warriors. Their laughs soft but real now, no longer edged with cold or fatigue. Your mother is stirring something in a pot, a rare treat during storm time, a stew cobbled together from dried meat, a few late-season roots, and whatever herbs survived the last foraging trip. The smell alone is enough to make your jaw ache with hunger. But your grandfather? He leans forward near the fire, adjusts the logs, and then begins to speak. No announcement, no warning, just words slipping into the room like smoke. "You remember," he says, "how they used to tell stories to keep the blood warm." Heads turn, not dramatically, but slowly, like sunflowers toward the sun. Everyone quiets, even the fire seems to hush itself slightly. He's not talking to anyone in particular, but you know what this is. It's a heat story. The kind told not just to pass the time, but to generate warmth. See, there's a belief, not just among your people, but others too, that some stories carry heat, that the act of telling them, listening to them, feeling them, actually changes the air. And in a place where warmth equals survival, stories become more than entertainment. They become tools. Tonight, your grandfather chooses a familiar one. The tale of a boy who wandered out during a snowstorm chasing a shadow, only to find himself inside the belly of a snow being, forced to make fire from frozen bones and sing his way free. You've heard it before, dozens of times, but never quite like this. Because every time the story's told, it bends, adjusts, grows in the retelling. This time the boy is younger, the snow being more clever, the fire harder to make, and your grandfather leans into the details like he's carving them into the air itself. The children are transfixed. One of them opens their mouth to ask a question but stops, instinctively understanding that to interrupt now would be to break something delicate. Here's a curious fringe detail that always stuck with you. In the old days, people believed that telling certain stories in warm months would invite bad weather. Or worse, call the spirits who owned the stories. That's why heat stories were told only when the land was sleeping, when the snow was on the ground and the rivers moved slow under their icy skins. Now, in this deep winter stillness, it's the perfect time, the only time. Your grandfather's voice rises and falls like a drum. He mimics the sound of the snow being's footsteps, crunch, 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 and then the boy's shivering breath short and fast until he can barely whisper. When he finally lights the fire from the frozen bones, a puff of smoke rises from your own fire, as if the story and reality have braided themselves together. Someone stirs the pot again. Your mother ladles a bit of the stew into a carved bowl, passes it to your aunt, then another and another. Soon everyone has food. Hot, fragrant, and nourishing. And still no one speaks. They eat while the story swirls around them, turning the inside of the teepee into something more than shelter. A sanctuary. That's the thing no textbook can teach. This teepee isn't just walls and fire and hides. It's a theatre, a church, a library. It contains more than bodies. It contains memory. You eat slowly, savouring every bite of the stew. The dried meat has rehydrated into something rich. The roots have softened. The broth is thick and slightly smoky. It's nothing special, but it's everything. Because hot food after a cold night is more than a meal, it's medicine. There's a debate among modern scholars about how much these winter stories truly influenced survival. Some say they were placebo, that the warmth was psychological, not physical. Others argue the opposite, that the act of listening, of sharing breath and laughter and fear through stories triggered real biological changes: endorphins, relaxation, slower heart rates, improved digestion. Basically, storytelling as an immune response. But sitting here, robe pulled tight, firelight dancing across your grandfather's face, you don't care about the science, because you can't feel the warmth. Even the air seems thicker now, more stable. You lean back against the padded wall, bowl cradled in your hands, and let yourself drift with the rhythm of the tale. You know the ending by heart. The boy escapes, the snow being melts, the fire lives, and everyone survives. But hearing it now, after what the storm just did to your world, it hits different. It's not just a story about cold and monsters and singing bones. It's a story about us, how we live through the freezing, how we pass on the warmth, how we keep lighting fires even inside the belly of the worst storm. And when the story ends, and your grandfather leans back into the quiet again, the heat doesn't go away. It lingers. The lodge is warmer than it's been all day, and not just from the fire, from the story, from the stew, from the circle of people who, like you, just made it through one more night. By mid-afternoon, the sky's gone that peculiar colour it gets after a storm, too blue to be real, like someone painted it on too thick. The snow that once howled and clawed at the teepee now lies quiet, blanketing the ground in silence and soft light. It almost looks harmless. Almost, but you know better. Snow this deep and still is deceptive. It's not passive, it's resting, waiting. And while the grown-ups tend to gear and hide and firewood, there's another task stirring inside the minds of the younger ones. The horses. The lodge stirs again. Your father calls your name with that tone, the one that means this is a job, not a choice. You rise, grab your outer robe, and brace yourself for the blast of cold that still lurks just beyond the flap. The horses are tied along a thick rope that cuts a curve through the snow beyond the main camp circle. They're not out there alone. They've been brought in closer since the first signs of the storm. But even so, they've weathered the night mostly outside, huddled against each other, like wind-battered statues. As you and your cousin trudge toward them, snowshoes crunching over the hardened crust, and you see the first horse lift its head. Frost clings to its muzzle. Its ears flick. Its breath puffs into the air in thick white bursts. Still alive, still strong. Taking care of horses during a brutal snowstorm is its own kind of survival skill. They're not just the animals, there are transportation, muscle, warmth, even warning systems. You've seen horses twitch their ears toward danger long before any person heard a sound, and in the cold, their survival ties directly to yours. First, you check for signs of distress, limping, stiff movement, bleeding hooves. Nothing jumps out at you. They're covered in snow, but that's good. Snow acts as insulation. The danger is if they're wet, if the snow melted and froze again. That's when frostbite creeps in, especially around the ears and fetlocks. You move down the line, brushing snow from backs, checking for ice clumps, offering a few strokes and a murmured word here and there. Your cousin reaches into a pouch and pulls out a small bag of dried grass and grain. Not enough to feed everyone, but enough to get a little life back into their legs. Each horse gets a handful, and as you work, their movements become more animated. Tails swish, a hoof stamps. One of the younger colts even tosses his head like he's trying to prove he never felt the cold at all. You smile, but this isn't just caretaking, it's strategy. These horses need to be ready to move, even in deep soft snow, especially in deep soft snow. If another storm rolls in, or the herd moves, or worse, something comes hunting, you can't afford to be tied to the earth. Here's a strange but true little detail. In extreme conditions, some people would let the horses sleep inside the teepee. Not often, not casually, but when the cold reached beyond brutal and into absurd, a horse might be brought in, tied just inside the flap, sharing heat with the humans. Their breath warmed the air. Their presence, though huge and awkward, offered protection. It wasn't ideal, but survival rarely is. Today doesn't call for that. But the thought lingers, and you glance back at the lodge, half-jokingly imagining a horse trying to sit politely around the fire. There's a fringe fact that comes to mind too, something your uncle once told you, half serious, half smirking. That horses and storms are spiritually connected. That if you dream of a horse the night before a blizzard, you better check your saddle straps. Some stories even suggest horses see the storm coming long before the sky shows it. You wonder if that's true. You remember the way the horses moved yesterday, just before the first flakes fell. The way they circled tighter, snorted more. Maybe they did know. As you finish your checks, you help your cousin scoop snow away from the tie lines, not with shovels, just with gloved hands and grit. The drifts have started to harden, and if you let them build, they'll freeze the ropes in place. You've seen it happen before, horses trapped not by their own strength, but by the prison of snow locked around their reins. Not today, not on your watch. Once everything's cleared and the horses are settling again, you brush your palms off and stand. Your knees ache a little from squatting, and the wind bites harder now that you've stopped moving. The sun glints off the snow so brightly it hurts your eyes, even through the fur-lined hood. You take a deep breath, let it out slow. The smell is sharp, clean, a mix of frost and wood smoke from nearby lodges. The kind of air that makes you feel like you've earned it. Back inside the teepee, you report what you saw. No injuries, good behaviour, a few hungry eyes. Your father nods and hands you a chunk of roasted meat, still warm from the edge of the fire. You bite into it gratefully. It's chewy, fatty, exactly what your body craves. You eat and sink back into your robe, letting the warmth settle again. There's an odd kind of gratitude in moments like this. A horse that didn't freeze, a fire that didn't die, a storm that didn't last forever. These small victories stack up inside you, build something sturdy, and the horses, they're not just animals out there in the snow, they're part of this circle, part of your defence, part of your rhythm. There's a quiet comfort in knowing that, while you slept wrapped in fur and firelight, your horses stood in the cold and didn't run. They stayed. Trusted you to come back, trusted you to dig them out, to check the rope, to feed them, to remember. You glance at the flap. Snow falls again now, just a whisper, nothing threatening, nothing sharp. The sky stays blue above the clouds, and your breath, though still visible, no longer feels like a warning. You survived the storm. So did your horses, and in a place like this, that's not just good news, that's everything. By late afternoon, the lodge is warm in that special way it only gets after a storm. When the fire has been going all day, the hides have dried from yesterday's snow, and everyone has rotated close enough to the coals to soak in some of their strength. You're leaning back now, stretched out with your feet near the base of the fire ring, one eye on the smoke drifting upward and the other half watching your cousin, attempting to fix a broken boot tie using teeth and sheer willpower. You'd offer to help, but honestly, it's more entertaining to watch her battle it. Around you, the bodies in the lodge move like slow dancers. People rise and stretch, change places, eat small handfuls of dried food. The lodge is full, not of noise, but of heat. Real, tangible, blessed heat. And with it comes something you've been subconsciously calculating since the storm first hit. The body count. Not in the grim way, not like war or disaster. More like math. You know this equation by instinct now. How many people are inside the lodge, how much heat they give off, how much heat the hides hold in. It's the quiet science of survival. Thermal regulation through people. 7 of you slept here last night, and now that everyone is awake and moving, the air inside the teepee is noticeably warmer than it was even with the fire alone. The balance is exact. If you'd had only 3, you'd be colder. If there'd been 10, too crowded, and the fire would have smoked you out. 7 is the sweet spot. There's a lot of talk in survival manuals about insulation, airflow, fire management. But the most underestimated factor in surviving a brutal snowstorm in the teepee is plain old body heat. Your little furnaces, every one of you. Heat radiates off your skin, your breath, your very muscles working under all those robes and hides. And in a circular space like this, with everyone positioned around the fire, that heat doesn't just drift away, it collects. You remember once helping your uncle set up a smaller lodge for a winter hunting trip, just the 2 of you. Same materials, same fire size. But that night, the cold settled inside the lodge like an unwelcome guest. The fire kept your face warm, sure, but your back ached from the cold biting through the hides behind you. No amount of adjusting the flap or layering hides could fake what wasn't there. More bodies. And it's not just warmth. Body heat tells you things. When the air shifts from cool to warm, when someone starts sweating instead of shivering, when breath fogs more or less, it's all part of the system. You monitor yourself and everyone else constantly without even realizing it. There's a quiet debate among researchers about whether this was intentional, this strategic use of bodies for heating, or just a happy accident of communal living. But ask anyone who's slept through a sub-zero night in a teepee, and they'll tell you It's no accident. You learn real quick where to lie, who to snuggle near, when to scoot closer to the fire, and when to let someone else take your spot. It's not just sleep, it's choreography. You look around now and take inventory. Your grandfather is half dozing beside the fire, his breath even, his robe slipping slightly from his shoulder, exposing a tangle of scars and history. Your mother and aunt are talking in low tones near the food bundles. Your cousins have settled down again, their earlier energy waning. The dog is curled near the door flap, always the first line of defence, always asleep until it isn't. And then there's you, warm, alert, and feeling the collective heat like an invisible web connecting every heartbeat in the room. It makes you think about how different this is from the modern world. People now sleep alone in separate rooms, in giant houses where heat comes from wires and vents and gas. Each person wrapped in synthetic fabric surrounded by plastic. They rely on systems, not each other. But here, this is the system, body to body, breath to breath. A shared ancient compact to stay alive together. There's a quirky little fact you remember from a travelling elder once. He said some plains tribes used to decide marriage matches partly based on who shared warmth well. Not just romantic compatibility, but thermal compatibility. She sleeps hot, he joked once. That's a good wife in January. Maybe it's a myth, maybe not. But when you've spent nights trying not to freeze, it starts to sound like a solid strategy. And honestly, there's something comforting about knowing your body is doing its part, that just by being here, by breathing, by radiating heat into the shared space, you're helping keep everyone alive. You don't have to talk about it, it's just understood. As the afternoon drifts toward dusk, someone tosses another log onto the fire. Sparks leap up, chasing each other into the smoke hole. You feel the ripple of warmth hit your toes and you shift, spreading it across your legs like butter. The hides beneath you are warm now too, not just from the fire, but from you, from everyone. There's no thermostat, no insulation panels, no double-glazed windows, just people, fire, fur, breath. And it works. It works because of the people, because you're here together, sleeping in a circle wrapped in shared space and shared heat with shared purpose. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, just to feel. The quiet hum of life around you, the comfort of bodies, the rhythm of fire, the soft creak of the lodge poles, everything breathing. And in that stillness, that warmth, that perfect balance of heat and silence, you realise something simple. You're not surviving in spite of the cold, you're surviving with each other, and that's a heat no storm can take away. Just after dusk, the sky outside dims into a deeper kind of blue, the sort of blue that tells you night is coming fast and not bringing friends. Inside the lodge, things are quieter now, but not in a tired way. More like a calm that comes after weathering something that tried to break you. The fire is burning low, the logs crackling gently, shadows dancing along the curved wall like old spirits stretching their backs. Everyone is still up, still moving, but slower. The kind of slow that says, let's not tempt the cold again tonight. You're by the flap, checking the lashings one last time. The rawhide ties are tight now. Your father retied them himself after the storm's tantrum last night. Still you pull gently, then check the extra hide panel he draped over the seam. The wind isn't screaming anymore, but there's a deep chill out there. The kind that doesn't need to be loud to be dangerous. Then just as you start to turn away, something shifts above you. A sound. Subtle. Almost easy to miss. But you've lived inside teepees long enough to know the difference between creaking and stressing. You freeze. Your eyes flick upward toward the meeting point of the lodge poles. The smoke hole, open just a crack to let the fire breathe, is framed by the thick timbers that give the whole lodge its shape. Those poles, the very bones of the structure, are groaning, not from wind, from weight, snow, heavy wet snow, a lot of it. You call to your father, your voice low but urgent. He's up instantly, stepping across the lodge with that unmistakable no-nonsense gait. One glance upward and his jaw tightens. Everyone else hears it now too. That subtle but growing strain, like a slow exhale that won't stop. The sound of the poles bending, settling just slightly. And you all know what that means. Time for teepee to be triage. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it moves fast. A sudden accumulation of wet, heavy snow can put just enough strain on the poles that the lodge begins to sag. If it goes unchecked, if the poles slip or crack under pressure, the whole thing can collapse. Not like a dramatic explosion, more like a slow suffocating fold with hide and wood and snow pressing down until you're trapped under your own roof. Everyone jumps into motion, no yelling, just swift action. Your uncle grabs a pole and braces it from the inside, pressing it upwards to redistribute the pressure. Your mother and aunt pull the outer hides tighter, adjusting their lashings to better anchor the weight. You and your cousin step outside, snowshoes on, breath steaming, to check the upper exterior. And there it is, adrift, thick and packed, halfway up the backside of the lodge. The storm's final gift. You grab a long stick, the snow brush, and start hacking at it, loosening clumps and sending them sliding to the ground in soft whumps. It's exhausting but necessary. Every handful that comes down could mean the difference between staying warm tonight or rebuilding from scratch. Here's something people don't realise about teepees. They're built to bend. The poles are selected not just for length, but for flexibility. Lodgepole pine, your people's favourite, has a give to it. It sways instead of snapping, it absorbs tension, like a dancer taking a step instead of a punch. But even so, every structure has its limit. And snow doesn't care how old your design is. There's a fringe historical fact that comes to mind. Something you once heard during a winter storytelling gathering. In especially brutal blizzards, some families would deliberately take down their teepees before collapse, then build temporary shelters by stacking hides over snowbanks or leaning poles against the drift itself, using the storm as part of the architecture. Not ideal, not warm, but it beats suffocating under canvas and weight. You wonder for a moment what that would feel like, tearing down your home in the middle of a storm, not to leave but to save it. Tonight you don't have to go that far. With a final scrape of the stick, you dislodge the largest clump. It thuds to the ground like a sleeping animal. You pause, panting, then press your hand to the outer wall of the teepee. It's lighter now. You can feel it. The structure breathes again. Back inside, your father is bracing a pole with his shoulder, his face tight with concentration. Your signal reaches him, a small nod, and he eases off slowly. The creaking stops. Everyone exhales. You stomp the snow from your shoes, duck inside, and feel the wave of warmth hit you like an embrace. The fire has been stoked again. The air smells of pine and smoke and something faintly sweet. Someone must have tossed cedar or sage into the flames during the scramble. The kids are back near the bedding, whispering, sensing the tension but knowing it's past. This is the part that always gets you, not the emergency, but the after. So the quiet, recentering, the way people settle again like nothing happened, like it was just another breath in a long winter. You settle near the fire, arms heavy from the effort, robe damp from melted snow. Your aunt hands you a cup of warm broth, and you drink slowly, feeling the warmth slip down your throat and into your chest. The teepee groans again, not dangerously, but like it's remembering its age. Like it's reminding you, I'm here, I'll hold, but only if you do your part, and you will, you always do. There's a sacred kind of contract between the people and their shelter. You keep the fire burning, it keeps the storm out. You repair its lashings, it protects your children. You listen to its warnings, the creak of a beam, the hiss of melting snow, and it lets you sleep through another night. You glance up again. The smoke hole is open just enough to let the night sky peek through. Stars glitter, cold and distant. But you're not afraid of them. Not tonight. Not while the poles still stand. Night returns, not with fury this time, but with ceremony. The kind of night that settles in gracefully, like an old friend stepping into the room, brushing snow from its shoulders, and sitting down beside you without needing to say a word. The storm is gone now. Really gone. No gusts, no whiteouts, no flap-snapping panic. Just a slow, quiet dark that wraps around the teepee like a second hide. And in the middle of it, you lie back, full-bellied, of course, warm, and still a little in awe that your body is intact, your family is whole, and your fire never went out. Everyone's moving slower now, drifting towards sleep in that practiced, communal way. You're not just dropping into unconsciousness, you're settling in, sinking down into the familiar rhythm of winter sleep. Hide upon hide, robe over robe, limbs curled like commas, heads bowed toward the warmth at the lodge centre. The last few murmurs taper off. One cousin snores. Someone shifts near the door. The dog lets out a long, satisfied sigh. You pull the robe up to your chin, close your eyes, and... wait, not yet. There's something else happening now beneath all of this. Something quieter than silence. The sacred side of it all. Because sleep during winter isn't just physical recovery. It's not just keeping warm, conserving energy, or giving your joints a break. In your culture, and in many others who know the bite of cold, sleep is spirit time. Outside, snow crackles as it settles. Inside, your grandmother begins to hum. Not a song exactly, more of a vibration. A low, deep tone that lives somewhere between her chest and the air. It's not meant for anyone's ears. It's meant for the space, the lodge, the beings who watch over you when your eyes close. You've been told since you were little that the winter is when the spirits walk most freely. Not the scary kind, not ghosts in the camp or vengeful monsters in the woods. These are different. Ancestors, animal guides, shadows of wisdom that only show themselves when everything else is still. And they love the cold, love the hush of it, love the way snow muffles the world so you have no choice but to listen inward. This is their season, and you're not just surviving it, you're sharing it. You turn slightly in your bedding and open one eye, just enough to see your grandfather place something into the fire. A small pouch. It sizzles and smokes instantly, sending up a fragrant plume. Sweet grass and something sharper. The air shifts, thickens, everyone smells it. No one reacts. This too is part of the ritual. You've heard stories from other camps, from older people who remember winters when the dreams came strong. They'd speak of visions seen during blizzards, bison walking through the lodge, ancestors speaking through sparks, children dreaming of stars that later turned into real journeys. Some said these were just the effects of hunger or cold, others knew better. The dream space in winter is closer, it's easier to slip into, like the boundary between the seen and unseen gets thinner with every inch of snow. Like your breath visible in the air shows you how close the two worlds really are. And tonight, you feel it. You close your eyes again and let yourself lean into the feeling. The lodge creaks softly above you. Someone shifts on the far side. The fire crackles and sighs, still working its magic. The dog growls low, nothing sharp, just a warning to something passing through. Sleep takes you gently, and almost instantly you're dreaming. You're walking in a snowfield, but you're barefoot. Your feet don't feel cold though. The snow doesn't sting. It glows. It lights your path. There are animals ahead, shadows of them, elk and fox and something nasia that might be a bear or might be something older. You follow without fear. The sky above you spins like a pot being stirred, and in the middle of it is a single star, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. You don't know what it means, but you don't need to. This is winter dreaming. It isn't supposed to be clear. It's supposed to stir something deeper than your thoughts, something older than language. You keep walking, and then a voice, familiar but not one you've heard in a long time. Your uncle who passed when you were still a child. He doesn't speak exactly, just smiles, nods, walks beside you for a bit. Then he's gone again. You don't wake up suddenly. It's more like rising slowly through water, back through the layers of hide and firelight and breath, back to your body. When you open your eyes, it's still dark. The lodge is completely quiet now, save for the occasional snap from the fire and the ever-present whisper of snow settling outside, but you feel different, like something shifted while you slept. Not a big shift, not something loud, just a realignment and a reminder. You're not just here to fight winter. You're here to be with it, to listen, to learn. There's a fringe belief, one of those stories the elders never quite admit is literal but also never deny, that the cold itself is sacred, that it's a teacher, that it strips away everything that doesn't matter and leaves only the truth. And if you can sleep through it, dream inside it, survive alongside it, you're not just tougher, you're wiser. You shift in your robe, feel the warmth that's still pooled under the hides, and close your eyes again. Not because you're tired, but because you're listening. The spirits are still out there, and the night's not over yet. By morning, a strange hush hangs over the lodge, different from the silence that followed the storm, different even from the peace of sleep. It's the quiet of change. You don't notice it at first. Not until you lift your head and catch a hint of light peeking through the smoke hole, brighter, sharper than yesterday. Not storm light, not survival light. It's something else. You blink, stretch, listen, no wind, no moaning poles, just the soft rustle of someone shifting in a robe, the sigh of the fire's last embers settling into ash, and the distant rhythmic tapping of snow dripping from the outer hide. You push back the edge of your bedding and sit up slowly. Your shoulders are stiff but not aching. Your toes, still attached. That alone feels like a small miracle. You glance around. A few others are still asleep, but most are already up, quietly tending to chores, careful not to shatter the soft atmosphere. It feels like an ending, or maybe a beginning. You pull on your outer robe, slip into your moccasins, and duck outside. The air hits you, not like a slap, but like a cold hand on the cheek. Startling, but not cruel. The sky is clear again, more blue than it has any right to be after what it put you through. The camp is sparkling, literally. Every surface is dusted in snow that glittered overnight, and now, kissed by the sun, it glows, like someone spilled crushed crystal across the world. And then you see it. Drip, drip, drip. Snow melting from the top of your teepee. Tiny rivulets trailing down the hides like tears. The beginning of thaw. Not spring, not yet, but the very first whisper of its intention. You're not alone in noticing. Others are standing outside their lodges, arms crossed, eyes squinting into the bright. Not talking, just witnessing. You share a look with one of them, your cousin from 2 lodges over, and he raises his eyebrows like, "Can you believe we made it?" You nod. Because yeah, you can believe it, but it still feels like a gift. This is the part people rarely talk about, what comes after the storm. Everyone wants the drama, the danger, the battle against the elements. But no one tells you about this moment. Standing barefoot in packed snow outside your teepee, staring up at the sun, trying not to smile too hard because your face is still windburned. The cold still lingers in your bones, but your lungs feel easier. Your eyes don't squint as hard. You're not bracing anymore, you're just being. You walk the perimeter of the lodge, checking the lines, the lashings, the smoke flap. Everything's holding, even the patches added mid-storm are secure. There's a small tear in one of the lower hide seams, probably from where a snowdrift pressed in too hard, but nothing urgent. You make a note to sew it up later. For now, you kneel and clear the snow away from the base of the lodge. Just a little. A courtesy gesture. A thank you to the structure that held you through the worst of it. The teepee's not just a shelter. It's part of the family now. Has been, really. But after a storm like that, it's earned a new layer of respect. Like an elder who prove, yet again, they've still got strength in their bones. You walk to the supply area next. The drying rack needs adjusting. A few poles need lifting from under the snow, but the essentials are intact. Firewood's low, of course. It always is after a storm. But there's enough for breakfast and a little more. The real chopping will begin later today, once the sun climbs a little higher and softens the edge off the trees. Inside the lodge you hear movement. The others are waking fully now. Someone yawns, someone else coughs, not from illness, just from the smoke's residue. The day begins not with a bang, but a stretch and a murmur. And now the camp shifts gears, from survival to reset. There's something sacred in that too. The rhythm, the resilience. It's not just about reacting to nature's fury, it's about meeting it, listening to it, and then, once it passes, having the wisdom to know what's changed. This morning your people don't rush. They observe, they walk slowly, speak softly. There's no need to bark orders or sprint through chores. The storm's over, yes, but winter is not. And everyone knows this isn't the last time you'll dance with the snow. But for now, there's no rush. You gather near the fire as it's rekindled. A smaller flame this time. Not for protection, but for comfort. Your aunt pulls out the last of the meat from the storm stash. Dried, yes, but still full of flavour. Breakfast is passed around, and for once, it's not eaten in tense silence, but with a few quiet laughs, a few stories shared. Someone teases your cousin for storing through the worst of the storm. She swears she didn't. No one believes her. You drink from the warmed broth, and it tastes like relief. Someone mentions going to check on the neighbouring camp farther upriver. No word during the storm, no surprise, but now that the path's clearer, a visit will happen. Not for gossip, for connection. That's what happens after storms. People come together again. Stories are exchanged. Meals are shared. Damage is tallied, repairs are made, and always, there's laughter, even if it's shaky. You stretch again, bones popping, joints loosening. You feel old, but also steady. You slept through the storm, you woke up, you're here. That's no small thing. There's a fringe idea, one you've heard tossed around during the deeper winter gatherings, that humans weren't meant to conquer the cold, not dominate it, not beat it into submission with technology or muscle. The cold, they say, was meant to teach, to sharpen, to strip away the excess until only what matters remains. And if you survive that, if you emerge from the storm not just intact but aware, you're not just alive, you're better. And now, standing here, hide robe pulled around your shoulders, hair stiff with frost, breath steady in your lungs, you begin to understand what that means. This storm didn't defeat you, it forged you. And the snow still clinging to the teepee's base, still gleaming in the sunlight, is the only evidence it ever tried. The sun is high now, floating over the camp like it's trying to apologise for the tantrum it threw just days ago. The snow glows under its attention, softening at the edges, losing that icy armour it wore during the storm. A few wet plops echo through the valley as clumps fall from tree limbs and teepee sides. And somewhere off near the ridge, a raven cackles in that smug way ravens always do, as if it didn't spend the storm hunkered down with feathers frozen in place. You step out into the light one more time, pausing at the flap of the lodge. Behind you, the interior hums with quiet tasks. Drying, mending, cooking, resting. No more crisis mode. Just life, steady and rhythmic. The crisis has passed, but its imprint is still fresh. You feel it in your shoulders, in your fingers, in the way you listen harder to every gust of wind. Once the snow tries to kill you, you don't stop checking over your shoulder for a while. Still, today is different. There's warmth in the air, not just the kind from the sun, but in how people move, how they speak to one another. The storm didn't crush the camp, it recalibrated it. You watch as a small group sets off down the path to visit another nearby family. They've loaded a sled with hides and a pot of leftover stew, a sort of peace offering, or maybe just a we made it too. You know they'll come back with stories, how bad the wind got, who lost what, who slept through the worst of it like a log, and somehow all of those details will weave themselves into legend by the time they're shared around another fire. There's an elder standing outside his lodge across from yours, pipe in hand, blowing long plumes of smoke toward the open sky. You nod to him. He nods back. No words, none needed. His teepee held. Yours did too. That's the conversation. But even as things settle, a new current begins to ripple through camp. Quiet, cautious, and slow at first. The idea of movement. Spring is not here. Not even close. But the worst of the deep freeze may be behind you. And that means it's time to start planning. Time to consider the next herd trail, the next river crossing, the next stop in the eternal, never-actually finished rhythm of following food and avoiding death. You hear your uncle talking about the meat cache. What's left? What needs replacing? Someone else mentions scouting a new firewood patch since the old one's nearly picked clean. You find yourself mentally calculating what needs to be repaired before the lodge can be taken down again. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Maybe weeks, maybe days. That's the way it works. The teepee is mobile, always has been. Built to be carried, rebuilt, broken down again. It's a house and a history, but never a prison. And after a storm like that, there's always the urge to move. Not to escape, but to shift. To find the next safe place before the world tries something new. But the truth is, some still sleep in teepees today, even in modern winters. Some do it to honour the old ways, some do it because they must. And the ones who do, they know something the rest of the world forgets. The cold is never truly gone. It just bides its time. The modern world has walls and wires, thermostats and double-paned windows. But out here, inside the circle of hide and pole and smoke and people, the cold is not the enemy. It's part of the story. There's a group up in Canada, a modern plains family, who still sleeps in a winter teepee every year just to remember. They layer up, tend the fire, tell stories as the wind screams outside, and when asked why they do it, they don't talk about tradition or education or proving something, they just say, it makes us feel real. You get that now, because for all its discomfort, the teepee in winter strips things down to the essence. Warmth, breath, presence. You're not worried about tomorrow's appointments or messages or bank accounts. You're worried about keeping the fire alive, about the baby staying warm, about whether you'll need to knock snow off the roof again before midnight. That's not regression, that's clarity. Inside the lodge, someone laughs, loud, honest, free. It's your cousin again, probably telling the exaggerated version of how he fought the wind trying to pee in the middle of the storm. You hear your aunt groan, someone else giggle. The storm is already becoming a story. That's how these things go. Pain folds into memory, memory into legend. You walk the perimeter of camp again, this time slower, more intentionally. You pass other teepees, their hide walls patched and soot-darkened, poles swaying just slightly in the breeze. You pass the horse line where steam still rises from their coats. They survive too because of you, because someone checked their hooves, because someone walked into the whiteout to make sure the ropes hadn't frozen. You end the loop back at your own lodge. Your hand rests on one of the poles. You feel the grain beneath your palm, the tiny creases from years of use. You wonder how many storms it's seen, how many nights it stood there, quietly holding the weight of people's lives. And you realise this story, your story, isn't just about how Native Americans slept through a brutal snowstorm. It's about how they lived through it. It's about how you did. Because survival out here is never passive. It's not luck. It's thousands of years of adaptation, intuition, ritual and teamwork, all braided together and wrapped in buffalo hide. So if anyone ever asks you, how do Native Americans sleep in a teepee during a brutal snowstorm? You tell them the truth. They don't just sleep. They prepare, they listen, they sing, they ration, they insulate, they lean into the fire, they listen to the poles, they tell stories, they laugh, they repair, they endure. And when the wind stops, they rise. And now, as the day fades again into twilight and the camp slows to its familiar evening rhythm, you feel the story starting to release you, like the final warmth of the fire curling around your feet before sleep. The snow has quieted. The smoke rises in a straight line. The cold, though still present, feels more like a companion than a threat. You think about everything that happened. The wind, the clap scare, the midnight fire tending, the way the warmth of 7 bodies saved the night. You think about the food rationed and shared, the furs layered with precision, the boots dried and rewoven, the spirits that drifted in with dreams, and the horses that stood frozen but faithful just beyond the flap. It wasn't magic, it were mastery. A legacy of survival honed over generations, not with gadgets or apps, but with instinct, reverence, and the kind of wisdom that only comes from being cold enough to pay attention. And as you crawl under your robe once more, the fire humming beside you, the wind barely brushing the side of the teepee, you close your eyes and realise you're not just surviving another winter night. You're part of a continuum of people who knew that storms don't end you. They shape you. So sleep easy now, the snow has done its worst. And you're still here, still warm, still part of the firelit circle. Good night, traveller. Dream strong.